Chapter 356. Agatha was stunned. She did not expect that Roland would have a stone of flight, and had already figured out how to use it. After hesitating for a while, she said, "We just understand the relationship between magic power and magic stones, but we can't make magic stones." "Can't make magic stones?" Tilly was surprised. "What do you mean?" "These magic stones are made by the demons." She sighed. "If we could get a stable source of magic stones, we could turn assistant witches into combat witches, and there would be no God's punishment army." "Made by the demons?" The witches could not help but look surprised. Only Roland's face darkened. "How much do you know about the making of magic stones?" he asked. "How are these stones made?" The tone of these two questions was a little stiff. Agatha did not want to answer, but considering that the demons were the witches' ultimate enemies, she had to tell them this sooner or later. She had no choice but to criticize Roland's rudeness in her heart. She slowly replied, "There is a strange individual among the demons. We call it the Beast of Chaos. It looks like a huge flower bud. When it stands up, it is about 3 or 4 people tall. It crawls slowly with tentacles. After it swallows a god stone of retaliation, it can produce various types of magic stones. The speed of transformation varies according to the type of stone. Have you seen these with your own eyes? We once caught one alive." She was very dissatisfied with the prince's questioning. The blessed army made a detour and raided a devil's town far away from the battlefield. There was a beast of chaos that was producing stones of lighting. The witches brought it back to Tequila and made it work for the holy city. This kind of demon is extremely low in intelligence. As long as it is constantly fed with stones, it will automatically transform. Unfortunately, we don't know how to make it produce more advanced magic stones, nor do we know how to raise it. Half a year later, it was like a plant with broken roots. Its entire body turned yellow and withered to death. After that, the Mystery Exploration Society sent several witches to other devils' towns to investigate. The information they brought back confirmed this point. Chaos beasts are the only way to obtain magic stones. The more powerful the stone, the slower the conversion speed. Most of the devils would use magic stones to fight. For example, the mad demons would embed magic stones that could instantly activate the power in their bodies on their arms, giving them powerful long-range attacks. All the magic stones we obtained were seized from our enemies or from their camps. "So this stone of flight originally belonged to a demon?" Tilly asked curiously. "As far as I know, only a powerful demon leader can have such a magic stone." Agatha sighed. "It should belong to a transcendent or above as a trophy. What about the types of magic stones?" Roland frowned. "Do they have magic stones with different abilities from the start?" "Of course not. If what you said was true, the human race would have been destroyed long ago." She rolled her eyes. During the first battle of Divine Will, most of the demons didn't wear magic stones. They relied on their powerful bodies, heavy armor, and iron spears to attack human cities. This is recorded in the history books. The war lasted for hundreds of years. After that, the human territory was gradually swallowed up until they retreated to the fertile plains. She sighed. "At that time, we were closest to victory. If the witches had been the leaders and trained the combat witches, the demons wouldn't have been able to step into the land of dawn. Then they had all kinds of magic stones. Probably, by the time of the second battle of Divine Will, they had more and more tricks up their sleeves," Agatha said gloomily. "This time, the war only lasted for 35 years before we were completely defeated. Although the elite blessed army can fight against the lords of hell, the enemy outnumbers us by a lot. According to the seniors of the Union, the witches had the upper hand in the first 10 years. A transcendent could kill their way through the demon's army, but later, we lost more and more people, so we could only defend the city." This time, the prince was silent for a long time, as if he was thinking about something serious. It seems that he finally understands the horror of the demons, Agatha thought. Not only do they have a large number, but they have also made amazing progress. I wonder what kind of army will appear in the next attack. Are those mad demons, fearsome demons, and lords of hell the types that you categorize the demons? Tilly asked while Roland was deep in thought. Yes, these names were spread after the Second Battle of Divine Will. Before they got magic stones, they didn't have much difference except for their body shape. Then how do they reproduce? Well, Agatha was startled. I don't know. It's not recorded in the books, and I can't find out from the captives that without the red mist, they will die soon. We don't have enough time to understand their language. And the demons that don't need the red mist are basically low-level beasts, so we can't communicate with them. Beasts? Yes, there are many kinds of demons, but they can be divided into two kinds, she explained in detail. One kind has magic power, and the other doesn't. The latter can survive without the red mist, but both their appearance and intelligence are no different from animals. For example, there are 8-legged reptiles that carry goods for the demons, and devil beasts that have wings that can carry demons from the sky. Wait! The prince suddenly raised his eyebrows and said, "Do the devil beasts you mention look like this?" He took out a scroll from the drawer and spread it in front of Agatha. This is indeed a devil beast. The 2-winged demon on the scroll was beautiful, and there was no doubt that it was the work of a witch. Have you seen this kind of demon? It's not far from here. Roland took a sip of tea. I thought it was a demonic beast that was tamed by the demons. So, they aren't one? Of course not. Low-level demonic beasts are just the demon's food, and the powerful heterogeneous demonic beasts are also the demon's enemies. When the months of demons come, their attacks will often be sharply reduced, and this is also our chance to catch our breath. Agatha paused and changed the topic to the enemies close at hand. If there are devil beasts, it means that there is a devil's camp nearby. Where are they? Just west of the concealing forest, behind a huge snow-capped mountain. Roland roughly described his exploration experience. It's already covered by the red mist. No, not yet. Agatha said excitedly. Those low stone towers are used to maintain the red mist. They will constantly evaporate the liquid stored in them, so they need to be replenished regularly. That's why the demons are hiding underground to reduce consumption as much as possible. We can try to attack this camp. Actively attack the demons. The witches all gasped. If there are demons on guard, it means that there are chaos beasts in the camp. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few high-level demons in a remote, small camp near the mountains and the sea. She bit her lip. The chaos beasts will always retain the previous type of magic stone. Even if it's not a high-level magic stone, I can use it to continue the research of the Quest Society. Maybe I can find out how the God Stone of Retaliation transforms. Chapter 357. The group of people stared at her in bewilderment. After a while, the prince cleared his throat and said, "Isn't the red mist extremely corrosive and unapproachable? It only works on witches. According to the research of the Quest Society, ordinary people, animals, and plants can all survive in the red mist, and flames can speed up its dissipation," Agatha said bluntly. "Didn't you say that ordinary people can defeat the demons? Then prove it to me. The winged devil beasts can be lured away by the flying witches." She pointed at Tilly. "The rest of us can set up a battle formation in advance, awaken the demons, and wait for them to walk into the trap. If it's really as you said, we can easily swallow this stronghold, right?" Roland shook his head with a smile. "I didn't tell you before, but this investigation will be completed using hot air balloons, not the flying witches you think. This kind of floating tool can only carry about 10 people at a time. I'm afraid it's impossible to transport ordinary soldiers. And..." He paused. "The plan you arranged is not reliable. No one knows how many demons are hiding in the ground. Close combat is very likely to cause casualties, and luring the devil beasts is also a dangerous job. I can't let them take the risk. How can there be a perfect plan to fight against the demons?" Agatha thought angrily. Every time the Blessed Army took the initiative to attack, everyone was determined to fight against the demons to the death. He was really lying to her. In order to achieve a goal, casualties were normal. Only people who had never experienced a cruel war would care so much about the life and death of the troops. Although she was disappointed, she still restrained her emotions and did not express her doubts. Everything would be decided after she finished looking at the so-called new weapons in the afternoon. But at this time, Agatha did not have too much hope. An armchair prince, a group of assistant witches, and weak ordinary people. Even if the weapons were powerful, how powerful could they be? Perhaps the moment the Union collapsed and dissipated, the human race was already doomed. You mentioned the Battle of Divine Will many times. Why do you call it that? Isn't it a war to resist the demon invaders? Roland asked as he changed a piece of paper and picked up the quill. That's what everyone calls it. As for the cause of the war, it's not recorded in the history books. Agatha replied disheartenedly. It's not wrong to call it a war against invaders. The demons did come to the land of Dawn through the Stone Gate. What Stone Gate? Scroll couldn't help but interrupt. The gates of hell rise from the ground. She sighed. Every time the bloody crimson moon descends, the gates of hell will open and devour the world we live in. This is what the history books say. In short, these damn gates of hell open once every few hundred years. The first demons came to the land of Dawn through them, and tried to kill us all. The periodicity of the enemy's attacks is also related to this. They need the red mist to survive. If they leave the red mist, they have to carry storage containers such as leather pouches, iron boxes, or jars made of demonic beast shells. This is also the reason why we still have a chance to welcome the second and third Battle of Divine Will. When the stone gates appear, the demons can build obelisks that can produce red mist on their own. These black stone towers are almost taller than mountains, and can cover a wide area. One of them can almost cover the entire fertile plains. She said slowly, if the next Battle of Divine Will breaks out, the demons will definitely build obelisks in the center of the fertile plains and turn the plains into their home. Then, they will rely on their camps at the edge of the red mist to attack you. This time, humans have no way out. If that day really comes, we can still hide in the fjords. Tilly shrugged. Are you talking about the islands in the swirling sea? How many people can live on such a small land? They're just waiting in despair for doomsday, Agatha said grumpily. All right, let's be optimistic. At least we have a general understanding of the demons now. The prince spread out his hands and said, when the third Battle of Divine Will begins, we won't be unprepared. Let's call it a day and talk about other things after lunch. After a sumptuous lunch, Agatha followed Vendi back to her room. Life in the barbarian land was more luxurious than she had expected. The variety of dishes and the taste were far better than any of the banquets in her memory. She was probably born during the war years. At that time, whether in her own stone tower or in the Union fortress, the food was mainly bread, jerky, and vegetable soup. But here there was salt, butter, honey, and some unknown spices. Although she had to pay attention to her image, she could not help but eat the whole plate of grilled mushrooms and 2 large pieces of pepper steak. But the more she did so, the angrier she felt. She hated herself for being unable to resist the temptation of delicious food, and shamed the holy city of tequila. But she also felt that the prince was so short-sighted that he still had the leisure to enjoy delicious food at such a critical time. He did not know that humans were going to die soon. I'm already familiar with the way in the castle, she said stiffly. Next time you don't have to bring me back. It's not troublesome, I'm very happy to do it, Vendi said with a smile. And if you have something to say, you can talk to me. Keeping it in your heart will only make you feel more depressed. Didn't he say that he would take me to see the new weapon test in the afternoon? Why did he leave the parlor alone after lunch? Do you mean His Highness Roland? Well, I think His Highness is going to take a nap. Vendi covered her mouth. This is his habit. He usually sleeps for an hour at noon. His Highness often says that the body is the capital of work. Without adequate rest, one cannot be competent for the job of a lord. Nap, what kind of habit is this? Isn't one night enough for him to sleep? Agatha thought angrily. This is obviously an excuse made by a lazy person, but you actually believe it. Ordinary witches and senior awakened ones. Why do you trust him so much? She took a deep breath. Just because he gave you a safe place to live? Do you really believe that he can defeat the devil? No, even if he can defeat the church that oppresses you? I don't know what the other sisters think, Vendi said softly. But I believe him. Because His Highness can make things that others can't imagine, or dare not imagine, into reality. For me, it's a miracle. Miracles. When the witches were being hunted and chased, he saved the Witch Cooperation Association. When everyone saw us as demons, he created a territory where witches and mortals can coexist. In just 1 year, His Highness relied on an army composed of civilians to resist the invasion of demonic beasts, and defeated the Duke of Rhine, whose territory was several times larger than his. Even the mad army of the Grey Castle Kingdom couldn't take a step into the western region. But these are only battles between mortals, completely different from the God's punishment army and the devil. Agatha shook her head. Of course, it's not just these, Vendi continued. The knowledge and ideas he imparted made the abilities of the four sisters evolve. He not only created powerful machines, but also weapons that can make a knight, or even an ordinary person, defeat an extraordinary witch. These are all miracles that I can see. They don't come from the tavern epics, nor do they come from the legends in the books. They all happen around me. One day, he will become the king of Grey Castle, and lead us to defeat any enemy. Her eyes were smiling, but her voice was full of confidence. I believe so. Chapter 358. A weapon that can allow ordinary people to defeat an extraordinary? After Vendi left, Agatha had been thinking about this sentence. Do they really know what an extraordinary is? It was a pity that she did not have a stone of measuring. Otherwise she would be able to clearly understand the magic power and types of these people. Just when she was about to lose her patience, Nightingale appeared at the door of her room. His Highness invites you to watch the new weapon test, if you don't want to go. I'll go, she said in a low voice. Please lead the way. Seeing the drowsy and yawning Prince Roland, Agatha suddenly had the urge to throw ice on his face to wake him up. However, this kind of behavior could easily cause misunderstandings from other witches, so she could only think about it in her heart. After leaving the castle, it was the first time that she saw the whole town during the day. Against the background of the heavy snow, the first thing that leaped into her mind was the neat and tidy double-story houses that stood side by side. Their shapes and sizes were exactly the same, and their white outlines and red brick roofs were particularly harmonious. The black streets were all straight, dividing the town into squares of similar size. Looking from a close distance, the scenery was completely a cycle of buildings, trees, streets, trees, and streets, as if they were layered on top of each other. Even the inner city of Tequila could not be so neat and orderly. But what made her feel that she had made a comeback was that, apart from the castle, there were no other buildings in this town that were worth a second glance. Even the castle itself, in terms of grandeur, was far inferior to the Quest Tower of Tequila. After all, it was just a small town. Agatha snorted disdainfully in her heart, and turned to look at Nightingale. How many people live here? Well, at first there were only more than 2,000 people, but now with the refugees from the north and south, there are nearly 30,000 people. 2,000 people dared to say that they could defeat the demons. It was simply an idiot. Wait, 30,000? Agatha's eyes widened. Tequila at its peak could only accommodate 50,000 people, but this palm-sized place actually had 30,000 residents? Could it be that she included the population of the surrounding villages as well? Although these square brick houses seemed to be able to accommodate more residents than the wooden bungalows, the increase in residents was not as simple as the accumulation of numbers. Once the population exceeded a certain limit, the demand on the city would increase exponentially. First of all, the demand for food and water had increased significantly. Secondly, the expansion of the shantytown and slums had led to the deterioration of public security. Finally, even the disposal of feces had become a thorny problem. At the end of the Second Battle of Divine Will, Tequila had encountered such a problem. As the major cities fell one after another, the number of people pouring into the holy city increased rapidly. Not only did the city not strengthen its defense, but it also almost paralyzed the entire city. The situation was only stabilized when the Union forcibly cleared out a group of refugees. Because she had experienced it herself, Agatha knew the difficulty of expanding the population of a city. Looking at Nightingale's casual expression, she was skeptical. Maybe Nightingale didn't know the answer, and was just fooling her. In the future, it would be better to ask Vendi for such questions. She thought that at least Vendi's attitude seemed more sincere. Passing through the crowded streets, Agatha followed the prince and the others up a section of the city wall that was built with mud. This kind of low wall was not towering or sturdy at all. There were no barbs buried in the wall, and there was no moat around it. The demons did not even need construction equipment. They could climb up on their own. The disappointment in her heart increased by a notch. Every 100 steps or so, there was a relatively wide platform that protruded from the front and back of the wall. It seemed that it was left for the installation of the ballistae. After walking along the top of the wall for a short while, Agatha soon saw the object of the test. The shape of the weapon was so special that it was difficult for people to ignore its existence. It was a long metal tubular object. It looked a bit like an iron spear that had been enlarged several times, but it did not have a spear tip. It was smooth all over and looked silver gray. It did not seem to be made of iron. The components at the end of the long tube were more complicated. In addition to the fixed bracket, there were 2 shorter tubes attached to the main tube. There were neither ropes nor arrow grooves. From its appearance, it did not seem to be a large ballistae or a catapult. But she also had not figured out how to use this thing to attack the enemy. This is Border Town's latest weapon, the 152mm Stronghold Standard Artillery, a symbol of justice and glory. The prince raised his hand and said, compared to the 12-pound field artillery, it has many improvements and all kinds of indicators are outstanding. It can definitely be called an epic-making weapon. Agatha could not help but frown. What justice and glory? Stronghold Standard Artillery? It sounds very frivolous. The following series of introductions seemed to be incomparably awkward. They were completely made-up words. Is he really the knowledgeable and multi-talented prince that Vendi talked about? Is he really the prince who is deeply trusted by the witches? Clap, clap, clap. Nightingale was the only one who applauded. The atmosphere seemed a bit stiff for a moment. Ahem, Roland cleared his throat. Then let's cut the crap and start the test. Iron Axe start. Yes, Your Highness. 3 people dressed in the same uniform immediately moved. Agatha stood to the side and stared at each of these people's movements, hoping to figure out the operating principle of this weapon. She saw one person slide down the iron block at the end of the long tube. Another person immediately inserted an orange-yellow pointed object into the tube, and then closed the iron block. Reporting, the preparation is complete. We can fire. Everyone cover your ears. The prince demonstrated and nodded. Fire. Wait, they're ready so quickly? Agatha was just about to open her mouth to ask, when a loud bang suddenly exploded in her ears. Her head suddenly buzzed, and the surroundings suddenly became quiet. The front end of the long metal tube erupted with an orange-red flame. It was dazzling and short-lived. At that moment, she felt the powerful force contained in the flame. The wall under her feet seemed to tremble. A wave of heat hit her face, and her body almost couldn't stand and took 2 steps back. The cannon itself suddenly sank back, but it quickly returned to its original position. Nightingale supported her from behind and seemed to be saying something, but she could only faintly hear the faint intermittent voice, as if it came from a very far place. It was not until the buzzing gradually subsided that her hearing returned to normal. Are you all right? She shook her head and looked at the empty snowfield in front of her, but she didn't see any change. Was this flame just to scare the enemy? Did you see where it landed? The prince asked a witch with green hair beside him. It hit behind a small hill. The closest one is the red flag. The latter observed for a while. But it's still a lot farther. The red flag? Agatha looked at Roland in confusion. What are they talking about? Fortunately, the prince quickly answered her doubts. This weapon can be used to shoot the cannonball like a crossbow. It's used to hit the enemy that's still far away. In order to observe the range of the cannonball, I asked Lightning to put down colored flags every 1 kilometer. The red flag is the last one, and it's set up 5 kilometers away. He explained, according to the size you're familiar with, 1 kilometer is almost more than 300 feet, which is close to a distance of 1 kilometer. Agatha froze on the spot. Did the other party mean that it had just thrown the bolt it had stuffed into it 5 kilometers away? Obviously, there are no ropes or power accumulators. How did it do that? One had to know that even siege beasts that relied on mana only had a maximum range of 3 to 4 kilometers. If he wasn't lying, as long as they build a tall and thick city wall with this weapon, they can effectively stop the demon's attack. But it's not easy to shoot a weapon with such an amazing range. I can't see where the cannonball will land. I always feel that something is missing. The prince touched his chin. Next, I'll test 3 rapid shots to attack close targets. Chapter 359. When the second shot was fired, Agatha covered her ears in advance. Then she saw an incredible scene. There was no long charging work as she had expected. The long metal tube, which seemed to be huge, showed a lightness that was completely inconsistent with its size. Every shot seemed to shake the earth, but the base did not move at all, as if the two had nothing to do with each other. Every time the long tube retreated and repositioned, it was fast and accurate. This process did not even require human control. Only 3 of the 4 operators were busy, and the commander called Ironaxe just stood aside and gave orders. She removed the metal block, slid down the copper shell, inserted a new bolt, and fired again. Repeating this cycle, Agatha could feel the earth-shattering fury of thunder almost every 10 breaths, and the close-range shooting also allowed her to witness the continuous snow pillars and mud princes from 2 miles away. Agatha was not lying. This weapon had indeed fired the bolt, and the speed was so fast that it could not be seen with the naked eye. Judging from the time it took to fire the snow pillars, even a transcendent would not be able to avoid its attack. Agatha looked at this silver-white long-barreled weapon, and could not help but be a little stunned. If the tequila had such a powerful weapon at that time, they might have been able to stop all the terrible demons under the city wall, so that the city wall would not have been destroyed, and they would not have fallen into the quagmire of a war of attrition. Is this a weapon made by witches? After a while, she swallowed and asked in a low voice. Judging from its smooth and shiny appearance, it was by no means made by the hands and hammers of mortals. But the prince's answer greatly surprised her. It's a masterpiece of witches and mortals, he said with a smile. The Longsong cannon was made by witches from smelting to casting, and the cannonballs were fired by alchemists. By the way, except for Anna, the witches who participated in the production are what you call assistant witches. Agatha suddenly felt a crack in her long-formed concept. She had thought she was tolerant enough to mortals, and was even ostracized by the Quest Society because of this. But now it seemed that what she had done was far from enough. Was the Union wrong from the beginning to the end? Could it be that what the prince said was right, that mortals could defeat demons? But if the cooperation between witches and mortals could produce such a powerful force, why did the first battle of Divine will end in a fiasco? Questions constantly emerged in her mind, and Agatha felt extremely confused. When the Longsong cannons continued to spew out flames, Tilly was equally shocked. Although she had witnessed the scene of the cannons bombarding the demonic beasts on the city wall, the shortcomings of those firearms were also very obvious. It was difficult to hit the demonic beasts from a distance, and it was impossible to attack them from a close distance. They could only exert their full power from a medium distance. However, the reloading speed was relatively slow. When dealing with the agile hybrid demonic beasts, it was very likely that the enemy would have already rushed to the foot of the city wall before the fire was ignited. In addition, in order to quickly load and fire, a cannon team needed 5 to 10 people to operate. As long as there was a problem in one link, it would affect the operation of the weapon. Furthermore, someone had to look after the source of the fire when igniting the fire. When the heavy rain came, the field artillery might not be able to play any role. However, Roland's newly developed Longsong cannon did not have these shortcomings. Charging from the rear could make the muzzle lower than the breech, which greatly increased the short-range shooting range, and the firing speed was several times higher. However, the number of people was reduced to 3. At the same time, there was no need for open fire, which meant that it could be used in bad weather. In addition, the attack range was far greater than that of a catapult. It was completely worthy of the word epic-making weapon mentioned by Roland. Although it could only be produced by witches at present, Tilly believed that this was only a temporary situation. Sylvie's observation could be used as proof. The continuous firing weapon that used to be equipped with only the chief knight had now been distributed to every soldier. Anna only needed to make a batch of specialized equipment to produce the weapon, and the specific casting and assembly could be done by the workers themselves. Looking at the expressions of Ashes and Andrea, she knew that the Longsong cannon was also an unimaginable thing for them. It was really a good thing to have such an ally, but as an elder brother, she felt that he was even more distant. She even felt that he was far ahead of her. This feeling made Tilly feel slightly disappointed. If only he could be a little more honest. Roland's heart ached when he saw that the shells that he had painstakingly gathered were used up in the blink of an eye. Even so, he still had to pretend to be unfathomable in order to conceal the reluctance in his heart. This was not a real test of the new cannon. In order to achieve a smooth demonstration effect, he asked Iron Axe to transfer a team of elite artillerymen from the artillery battalion. They started the simulated shooting practice a few days in advance, during which they also conducted 2 live shots. This time it was just a show of power for the witches. The shooting process was very smooth, and the result was also ideal. At least from Agatha's shocked expression, the performance of the cannon was beyond her imagination. However, for Roland, the live shooting effect of the Longsong cannon was far from satisfactory. Except for the sacred caliber of 152 mm, the other parts were far from the real 152 mm. With Anna's precision processing ability, Lucia's element purification, and finally Sylvie's metal flaw detection, in theory he could produce a real modern mature cannon, not a replica with a range of only 7 or 8 kilometers. The key was in the details. From the looks of it, its medicine room was too small. Considering the weight of the fixed shell, Roland deliberately reduced the volume of the chamber, which led to the lack of charge. Although it had a slender barrel with a diameter of 40 times, the range was still not ideal. The other problem was the propellant. Because the nitroglycerin was still in the trial, the shells were all filled with nitrocotton, which was also the reason why Roland was distressed. The nitrocotton consumed by several shells was enough to fill thousands of bullets. In addition, the smokeless propellant was not gelatinized, which was equivalent to further reducing the charge. Finally, the shell itself was still an enlarged version of the bullet. The warhead was not charged, and its lethality was completely based on kinetic energy. If it missed the target, it would mean 0 damage. At present, it could only be used to attack some slow enemies. In short, there was still a long way to go to achieve the scene of covering the whole area with bullets and cannons. However, Roland felt that he might not have as much time as he initially expected. Since he knew that the transformation of the magic stone originated from the demons, the warning in his heart became more and more intense. If the demons also had their own technology, would there also be a phenomenon of technological advancement in a certain period of time? Chapter 360. This was not a wild guess. The history of human civilization was the best proof. It took humans nearly 1 million years to go from the Stone Age to the Iron Age, but it only took 3,200 years to go from the Iron Age to the Steam Age. It only took 150 years to go from the Steam Age to the Electric Age, and another 50 years to go from the Steam Age to the Information Age. From the information revealed by Agatha, it was known that the demons were not the same. More than 800 years ago, they fought in a similar way to humans. They fought in close combat with bronze and iron swords and shields. Some senior demons even wore god stones of retaliation to fight against witches. In every siege, when faced with long-range weapons such as crossbows and catapults, the demons basically could not come up with any effective countermeasures. They often had to pay a heavy price to conquer a strong city. If not for their inborn strength, humans would have won the first battle of divine will. However, during the second battle of divine will, the demons had already developed the ability to mass-produce magic stones, and their species had also been divided. Different forms of demons were responsible for different combat tasks, and even the mad demons, who were numerous in number, had developed long-range attacks. According to Agatha, they had even developed transportation tools and engineering machines powered by magic stones. Now that another 400 years had passed, what had they evolved into? Roland thought that Agatha could bring him the magic stone technology of the Tequila Quest Society and open up a new path of industrial development. He did not expect this technology to come from the enemy. In this way, the battle with the demons would probably turn into a war between industrial technology and magic stone technology. Whoever developed faster would be the one to win in the end. Roland could not help but sigh. It seemed that he needed to have a good talk with Tilly. After dinner, Roland waited for Tilly Wimbledon in his office. Seeing that she came alone, he felt relieved. At least in terms of trust, they had made great progress. "I heard from Nightingale that you have something to discuss with me," she said directly after sitting down. "That's right." Roland personally poured a cup of tea and handed it to her. "The main thing is how to deal with the third battle of divine will and our future." Tilly took the teacup and blinked, as if waiting for him to continue. From Agatha's words, we know that the four kingdoms are just a corner of the land of dawn. Even the barbarian land used to be a prosperous and fertile plain. Humans had been defeated by the demons twice, so they had no choice but to retreat to this place. According to the opening time of the Stone Gate, the third battle of divine will is not far away. Roland hesitated for a moment, then said bluntly, "I hope you can stay." Tilly was slightly startled, then she could not help but chuckle. "I didn't expect you to say this. It's hard to predict the strength of the demons. We must gather all the strength we can to have a chance to win the war." Although Agatha said that the first battle of divine will was fought by the cooperation of mortals and witches, it's very likely that it's just a superficial cooperation. There's no essential difference from the second battle of divine will, he said in a sincere tone. "As you can see, the additional memories in my mind are weapons that can defeat the demons. Once the things in the memories are transformed into entities, even mortals can burst out with unimaginable power. Witches are responsible for operating the war machine, and ordinary people should be the right choice to participate in the war. When the war is coming, every additional person is equal to an additional force." Tilly took a sip of tea and did not answer for a long time, which made Roland feel anxious. However, it was useless to be anxious at this time, so he pretended to be calm and quietly waited for her to speak. After about a quarter of an hour, Tilly sighed and broke the silence. "If I stay, what will happen to the witches on Sleeping Island? Does that mean she agrees?" Roland suppressed his excitement and said, "Let them all come to Border Town, this place can accept them. I'll specially designate a territory for your witches to live in, and everyone will be treated the same as in the Witch Union. I don't want to put them all into the Witch Union, they will still be led by you, which is equivalent to establishing an autonomous special district in the Western region. This will not only facilitate cooperation, but also enhance mutual understanding." "All of them will be treated the same?" She could not help but chuckle. "You don't dislike their ability, you know, most of them can't fight for you." No. Roland waved his hand repeatedly. "Under the cooperation model I envision, the assistant witches can play a greater role than the combat witches, because they don't strengthen themselves, but tens of thousands of ordinary people. There is no lack of power in nature, only people who discover and use power. In this regard, the assistant witches are much more capable." "So this is your real purpose?" she asked slyly. It's indeed a generous offer." Tilly smiled and shook her head. "Officially, I can't refuse to fight against the demon's invasion with you. Privately, I also want to stay here and learn interesting knowledge. But I can't promise you now." Roland was startled and asked subconsciously, "Why?" "Since I'm the leader elected by the witches of Sleeping Island, I can't decide their future based on personal preferences. Once they move to the Western region, this organization will inevitably lose its independence, and if there are any changes at that time, they won't be able to resist. If one day we have a conflict in the future, will all the witches pack up and return to Sleeping Island again? No, how could I possibly? I can't pin their future on verbal promises," Tilly interrupted. "If you were me, would you hand over everything to the other party simply because you are an ally?" Roland was suddenly stunned. He did not need to think about the answer. If he was faced with such a choice, he would never easily agree to it. Most of the time, the closer they were to each other, the easier it was to have a conflict. This was the reason why the so-called distant friends attacked the nearby enemies. It was the same between forces, and it was the same even between lovers. See, your concerns are the same as mine. But you're my sister, I won't hurt you. Roland had to make a last effort. Is that so? But I still can't believe the reasons you gave me. Tilly closed her eyes sadly. Maybe this is also the reason why I can't immediately agree to you. She paused and seemed to want to put these thoughts aside. For now, let's get along as allies. I'll fully support the construction of Border Town. If you need a witch, I'll try my best to meet your requirements. If it's really difficult to resist the demon's attack, you can return to Sleeping Island and live a peaceful life. This is all I can do for now. Chapter 361. The fire in the fireplace flickered twice and gradually dimmed. Nightingale appeared and added a few more pieces of firewood into the fireplace. There was a crackling sound in the fireplace, and the flames suddenly brightened. Roland looked at the elongated shadow of the cup and let out a deep breath. Tilly had been gone for a long time. He had been thinking about their conversation to see if there was any way to change the result, but in the end, he did not find the answer. Trust was a very strange thing. Apart from investing time, other methods had little effect. So there are things that you can't do. Nightingale patted the dust off her hands and walked over to sit in her usual seat. What did you say to her that day? A white lie. Roland leaned back in the chair. It's normal that she doesn't want to believe it. He paused. You said you had a younger brother. If he suddenly became very different from before and emphasized that he was still the same person, would you believe him? You mean the guy who looked innocent but betrayed me the moment he turned around? Nightingale curled her lips. In my opinion, he was basically no different from a mutation. Well, I shouldn't have mentioned this. It doesn't matter. I've already left the Guylan family. They're just strangers, she said disapprovingly. She and I were like strangers too. Roland sighed. Or rather, I didn't get along well with everyone in the palace. If you're annoyed, you can tell me. Nightingale smiled. I've always been very curious about the life in the palace. I also want to know how bad your personality was at that time. You could let your terrible reputation spread to Silver City. To be honest, I was much worse than I am now. Roland could not help but curl the corner of his mouth. He picked out a few things from his memory and said, She probably started to hate me from the moment I threw her into the glass. It's really terrible. She clicked her tongue. But I think she doesn't hate you now. Oh. Roland raised his eyebrows. You even know this? Of course, didn't she say a few words? Personally, I also want to stay here and learn interesting knowledge, Nightingale mimicked. It sounded like words of comfort, but the truth is that she wasn't lying when she said it. If he really hated this place as much as he did in the past, he wouldn't want to stay here. Are you comforting me? Roland laughed. If telling the truth counts, she shrugged, and I think it's good to keep the status quo. Why? She promised to give priority to providing witches for Border Town and support you in fighting against the demons. So it doesn't matter if she's here or not. If all the witches from Sleeping Island come in at once, and there are a few more like Ashes, I will be very busy. Nightingale threw a piece of dried fish into her mouth and muttered, Not everyone is as obedient as Maggie. Roland could not help but laugh. From what you said, you seem to have caused trouble for Ashes? Ah. No, why would I? Nightingale waved her hand. I just watched her occasionally to prevent her from harming the members of the Witch Union. Really? She tilted her head and whistled. I don't know if it's an illusion. Roland stared at her and said, Why do I always feel that you're actually very happy after I was rejected? That's an illusion, Nightingale said with certainty. Then she looked in the direction of the door and said, Well, someone's coming. She disappeared after saying this. Is this the cicada's escape plan? Just as he was thinking about this, there was a knock on the office door. Roland was greatly surprised. It was almost midnight, and there was still someone coming? He replaced the candle on the candlestick and said, Come in. It was Agatha who opened the door. The prince could not help but be surprised. What's the matter? She walked to the round stool in front of the table and sat down without saying a word. I heard from Ms. Vendy that whether it is the flintlock that can restrain the extraordinary or the artillery with amazing range, they all originated from your ideas? And the principles and production methods of these things are all recorded in the books you wrote? Do you mean natural science theoretical foundation and elementary chemistry? There are indeed relevant principles in them, but as for the production methods, they were not written due to space constraints, Roland said. After all, these are only elementary theory textbooks. You came here to ask me about this? Only members of the Witch Union can learn this knowledge, right? She did not answer, but continued to ask. Roland nodded. He had already guessed what she wanted to say. Then I applied to join the Witch Union, Agatha said almost without pausing. But the Witch Union belongs to Border Town. Are you sure you want to work for the town? He asked curiously. Its lord is not a transcendent, but just an ordinary mortal. You can create weapons that can fight against the demons, so you can't be regarded as an ordinary mortal. Even the Quest Society will have a place for you. Agatha paused for a moment. As long as you don't harm the witches and don't become enemies with the survivors of the Union, I don't mind cooperating with a mortal. It was probably a little difficult for her to say that working for a mortal was temporarily, but Roland was impressed by Agatha's ability to accept. Perhaps people engaged in research were always able to quickly accept new things. He held back his laughter. I thought you would follow Tilly to Sleeping Island, which is a city built by witches. It's just a refuge to escape from the church's pursuit, she shook her head. I've already asked them about the situation before I made this decision, and I've seen too many cities ruled by witches before I was frozen, but now they've all been buried in the dust. It's meaningless if we don't defeat the demons. I hope to see the hope of victory here. You will, Roland nodded. But I can't guarantee that you won't become enemies with the Union, because it may not have disappeared, but changed its name to hide itself. What? Agatha was stunned. I've carefully thought about what you said. Even if they fail and escape from Tequila, the Union still has transcendence and a group of blessed warriors. In this undeveloped area full of indigenous people, it's unlikely that they will be completely cut off from the news, unless they want to do so, Roland said in a low voice. The church is probably the incarnation of the Union. It's not the mortals who took away the power and the manufacturing method of the gods' punishment army from the witches, but the witches themselves who turned the Union into an organization that hunts witches. In this way, it's more convenient for them to create a large number of God's punishment army. You mean, the current tragic situation of the witches being oppressed and hunted is all caused by the Union? She asked incredulously. I'm not sure, it's just a speculation. Roland stood up and walked to the bookshelf. He took out a few thick black books and handed them to her. These books contain the chronicles written by the church themselves, as well as the histories of the 4 kingdoms recorded by astrologers. You can refer to them. No matter what, the church is now our enemy, and also a target that we must destroy in the future. If you decide to stand on the side of the witches and fight against the demons with me, the Witch Union welcomes you. Chapter 362. Early the next morning, Agatha received a delicate parchment scroll from Roland. What's this? A contract. After you put your thumbprint on it, you'll officially be a member of the Witch Union. She unrolled the scroll and read the contents in detail. She was surprised and asked, That's it? The prince did not seem to understand what she meant. What do you mean? The restrictions on it are meaningless. Agatha pointed to the content of the contract. It only mentions that you can't betray Border Town unless you violate the agreement between the 2 parties, but there are no restrictive measures. If you really want to betray us, I'm afraid there won't be any psychological pressure. And the wording on it is too loose. Is this really a contract? Well, I wrote it casually at that time. It's just a formality. The prince nodded and did not seem surprised. It seemed that he was not the first person to point out that there was something wrong with this contract. A form full of loopholes. She secretly criticized, poked the ink pad, and put her thumbprint on it. The union contract had very few requirements for both parties. According to the terms on it, she would not feel any changes after joining. Although she felt that it was unnecessary, She also felt a lot more relaxed. Although she said that she was cooperating with mortals, she knew that the gray-haired man was the actual leader of the Witch Union. If she had to serve a mortal respectfully like she did with the higher-ups of the Union, or the lords of the 3 cities, she was afraid that it would be difficult for her to accept. Now it seemed that at least she had a considerable amount of freedom. Roland put away the parchment scroll and asked curiously, "What are the restrictions on the contract in Tequila?" "This is needed when recruiting mortals. It can range from physical punishment to mental torture." She curled her lips. "As for us, we don't need to sign such a thing. The Union is a lifetime contract. Once you join, the only road for defectors is death." Well, he took a breath. "Welcome to the Witch Union. Remember to come to the castle garden after breakfast. I need to test your ability comprehensively." The process of testing the ability was simpler than Agatha had imagined. She just had to demonstrate the various characteristics of her ability in front of the prince and answer a few questions. The magic power is in the form of a sky-blue pentagonal prism. Its capacity is medium. The type is summoning, and the ability has already evolved once. The initial effect is to create low temperatures, and after the evolution, it can solidify at room temperature. It's a very convenient ability. Roland finished recording and asked, "How did you evolve your ability?" "Constant practice and an epiphany," she said proudly. As the youngest High Awakened, everyone in the Union called her the genius of Tequila. "Every day I tried to lower the temperature so that the water could freeze faster. Until one day, I saw a witch who could control flames melt a piece of lead cake into liquid. As the flame continued to roast it, the lead liquid began to boil. This scene made me realize that perhaps everything has 3 states: gas, liquid, and solid. Lead is solid at room temperature, but as long as the temperature is high enough, it can also turn into gas. Water is liquid at room temperature, but when the temperature drops, it will solidify into ice. Then the gas that appears to be in the gas state at room temperature, will it be like lead? As long as the temperature is low enough, it can also be frozen." With this idea in mind, I quickly felt the magic power in my body had a completely different change. Finally, I was promoted to a High Witch, and this epiphany was also recorded in the general principles of the 10,000 laws. As a matter of fact, she was the youngest person to be included in the book. At that time, even the 3 chiefs praised her. They believed that this epiphany was not only a great inspiration for witches' promotion, but also had great significance for real research. However, when she said this solemnly, Roland's expression was quite calm. "I see." The prince nodded. "What is the general principles of the 10,000 laws?" "Wait, aren't you surprised?" Agatha was surprised. "This world is full of gas. It seems ethereal and weightless, but in fact, it can become flowing water or frozen ice. It's a very normal phenomenon. There are many kinds of gas, and each has a different boiling and melting point." Roland shrugged. "Why should I be surprised? This is common knowledge in the general principles of natural science." Agatha suddenly felt a little stuffy in her chest. She took 2 deep breaths. "Well, I'll study this book carefully. What about the general principles of the 10,000 laws?" "It's a record of the evolution of all the High Awakened's abilities," she said grumpily. "But the abilities of witches are originally different, and it's difficult to achieve promotion through imitation and reference. Naturally, it's not as good as your general principles of natural science." "Did I say something wrong?" The prince looked puzzled. "No, I'm too arrogant." Agatha felt even more depressed. Ahem. He probably noticed her displeasure, so he changed the topic. "You just said that the abilities of witches are different. Among the thousands of witches in the Union, there's no one with the same ability?" "No," she replied stiffly. "The Quest Society believes that the form of magic determines the ability, but no witch's magic form is exactly the same. But when you saw Anna before, you thought it was a flame ability at first glance. This is just a common classification, simple and easy to understand. The ability to emit light and heat can be called the flame type, but with the growth of magic, the solidification of adulthood, or the advanced awakening, the seemingly identical ability will undergo great changes. Even if it's the initial stage of the flame, some witches are good at controlling the temperature, some witches are better at controlling the fire, and some witches can throw it out. Even if you can't see the difference for the time being, it's caused by poor observation methods. Agatha said, the Quest Society's classification method is more formal, and generally speaking, it's similar to your classification method. There are also 3 types. Roland asked. 4 types. The main difference is the summoning type. The Quest Society divides it into 2 types. One is called magic energy, and the other is called shaping. You should be able to understand the difference from the literal meaning. Magic energy refers to the type of summoning that requires continuous consumption of magic power like Anna's, and will disappear once the magic power is exhausted, while shaping is the type of summoning that can exist for a long time like Soroya's painting. Although I don't know what Soroya's ability is, it's more or less the same. Summoning that can exist for a long time can be regarded as shaping, such as my room temperature solidification. I see. Roland also recorded these contents. That's all for today's test. As usual, when I don't give you any tasks, you can practice your ability on your own, but I think there's someone who might urgently need your help. Ooh, the chief alchemist of Border Town, Kyle Sichi. Chapter 363. According to the literature on the street, the most important part of large-scale production of nitroglycerin was temperature control. The large amount of heat released during the reaction could easily cause sensitive explosives to explode. As long as the temperature of the large reaction vessel was kept constant, it could safely produce nitroglycerin in batches. During the laboratory test, ice could be used to cool it down, but when it came to large-scale production, it was a bit inadequate. The heat absorption effect of the ice-water mixture was limited, and when a large amount of heat was released, the cooling rate was slow, and it consumed itself quickly, making it very troublesome. But Agatha's ice coffin could easily produce a temperature of nearly 100 degrees below zero, which was undoubtedly an excellent guarantee for cooling the vessel. Roland didn't know whether this information was reliable or not, but it didn't prevent him from testing it one by one. Even if there was an accident, there was still Nana as the last insurance. Back to the office, he wrote a letter of introduction and gave it to the guard, asking the latter to take Agatha to the chemistry laboratory and deliver the letter to Kyle Sichi. In the letter, in addition to introducing Agatha's ability, he also fabricated a noble identity that she was born in an upper-class family, but accidentally drifted to this place, so that the alchemist could control his temper and treat this witch who could bring great help to the chemistry experiment. After the guard left, Roland was still a little worried. Kyle was a straightforward person, and Agatha was an ancient witch who thought highly of herself, so he hoped that they wouldn't quarrel. Just as he was thinking about whether he should go to the laboratory later, Scroll opened the door and walked in. Your Royal Highness, the results of the second batch of the Universal Education Assessment have come out, she said with a smile. This time there are a total of 762 people who passed. Half of them are adults. So many? Roland was happy. Compared with the first batch of more than 50 children from Car Academy, this time half of the adults graduated, which meant that the evening training had achieved results, and also verified the feasibility of a series of teaching programs formulated by the Ministry of Education for the large difference in progress, different study times, and other situations. Yes, you have been promoting universal education for almost half a year, and this batch of students are generally under 25 years old. So mastering the basic reading and writing is not too difficult. It probably had something to do with the writing itself. If it were Chinese, it would not have been so fast. Roland thought, although he always felt that this earthworm-like writing was as awkward as it could be. He had no idea how far he could go when he started to implement universal education. After all, this was the first time something like this had happened in Grey Castle. There were no precedents. In accordance with the principle of encouragement and subsidies, he discussed with Scroll for a long time, and developed an education program that would set up classes for minors during the day and classes for workers at night, supplemented by a series of incentive policies to entice workers to come and learn. So far, the effect was actually quite good. Of course, all of this was inseparable from Scroll's responsible management. You've worked hard. Roland nodded. "It is my honor to serve you, Your Highness." She bowed slightly. As the oldest witch in the Witch Union, it was difficult for Roland to compare her with little girls like Anna and Lightning. Scroll always gave him the feeling that she was not in a hurry, and she was always clear. When discussing problems, she would quietly listen to his ideas, but also straightforwardly point out his mistakes. Sometimes, he even felt like a junior in front of her. Perhaps she was born to be a teacher. Roland smiled and shook his head, putting these thoughts aside. In short, now that there was a new batch of fresh troops, some of the long-prepared factories could finally start operating. "Please help me call Barav over," he said excitedly. The city hall supervisor quickly rushed to the castle. Since he started building the city, his workload had increased day by day. Not only did the number of blank areas on his forehead increase, but he also had a few more wrinkles. However, he didn't look tired or sleepy at all. Instead, he looked more and more energetic. "Your Highness, are you looking for me about the job recruitment?" The supervisor probably knew about the new batch of graduates in Border Town, so he took the initiative to ask. "Yes," Roland nodded. "Taking advantage of this year's early months of demons, Timothy can't harass the western region. I want to expand the size of the army in Border Town to cope with the next year's war. And at the same time, expand the number of people in the existing factories. And City Hall," he quickly added. "After the city is built, your territory will be 5 to 6 times larger than it is now. City Hall personnel will also have to be expanded to a corresponding scale to manage such a vast land." "Rest assured," the prince smiled. "I won't forget you." He took out a piece of paper and said while writing, "Among the new batch of more than 700 graduates, the City Hall will provide 20% of the jobs, the acid factory will take 40%, and the rest will be absorbed by the steam engine factory and bicycle factory. The bicycle factory needs at least 100 people. The salary will be set according to the previous standard, but the acid factory can be slightly raised to fill the required number as soon as possible. As for the soap factory and perfume factory, the main work was done by witches. Ordinary people only needed to repeat a few simple steps, and they didn't need to be literate to be competent, so they weren't included. Roland believed that education could not only improve a person's knowledge and vision, but also improve his sense of responsibility and sociability. This was the significance of enlightenment. This was also why a large number of people who had received primary education were needed in advanced factories. A worker with social attributes would understand the importance of cooperation, altruism, and self-awareness better than an illiterate person. This was crucial for a complex process with many steps of fine work. "Yes, Your Highness," Barav responded. "How many people do we need to expand the army?" "At least 1,000 people. Open the recruitment to newly promoted civilians and Eastern Region refugees," Roland ordered. As in the past, the City Hall will release a notice, and the First Army will be responsible for the review and recruitment. 1,000 people? Barav was startled. "This is equivalent to the current total number of people in the First Army, Your Highness. If they are all equipped with materials and weapons according to the specifications of the First Army, the cost will not be low. I've considered all these, so let's do it." Now that he knew the crisis of the demons' invasion was imminent, he naturally couldn't plan slowly like before. In addition to bringing the entire western region under his rule, the first thing to do next spring was to completely defeat Timothy. As long as he eliminated this opposing regime, even if he didn't occupy other areas, the new western region would become a veritable king's city. At that time, whether it was the expansion of the population or the promotion of trade, he would be able to do whatever he wanted, unlike now where he was restricted in every aspect. However, he didn't need to disclose these plans to Barav for the time being. He only needed to arrange the financial distribution and material distribution for himself. After the City Hall supervisor left, the guard brought a piece of news. Marjorie's caravan had arrived. Chapter 364. At the pier, more than 10 sailboats were lined up in a line. The top of the mast and the crisscrossed hemp ropes had been wrapped into a white-silver thread by the snow. The refugees filed out of the cabins and rushed to the open space in front of the pier. This was not the first time that Border Town had received refugees from all over Greycastle. The whole process was orderly, for iron railings divided the crowd into two slender lines, which could control the flow of people and avoid trampling. On both sides of the railings were patrolling policemen holding short sticks. Anyone who pushed or tried to climb over the railings would be hit with a stick. There were punishments and rewards. In order to appease the people who had gone through hardships to arrive here, the refugees who passed through the railings were given a bowl of steaming porridge. In any case, filling their stomachs could effectively reduce the refugees' panic and discomfort towards the unfamiliar territory. This time, in addition to the police, the First Army, and City Hall officials, Nightingale and Sylvie also participated in the inspection in order to find out the drug users that Timothy had planted in the crowd. Under the scrutiny of the Eye of Magic, no matter if it was pills or snow powder, there was no place to hide. Thank you for everything you've done for the Western region. Roland withdrew his gaze and said to Marjorie beside him, "If it weren't for your fleet, I'm afraid these people would have to spend the winter in the slums of other cities. It's rare for your highness to ask me for help in such an urgent tone, so I naturally have to do my best." She smiled. "However, many crew members are unwilling to sail in the heavy snow, so I can only gather these 13 ships. It's better than nothing." Roland exhaled a white breath. Since he learned that there were still a large number of refugees stranded in Silver City, Redwater City, and Willowtown, he sent a letter to Marjorie's Chamber of Commerce asking for help, hoping that the other party could gather a fleet to help him transport the refugees. Although 13 ships were a little too few, they could always transport the people back by 2 more trips. According to the calculation that it would take 2 weeks for a sailboat to carry 100 people and a round trip, it would take about 1.5 months to transport the 3,000 stranded people. The Golden Dragon carried by the First Army squad could not last until then, so they had to carry food and cold-resistant clothes on this return trip. Roland did not wish for the refugees to be unable to reach their destination, even though they hoped to board the ship. Thanks to Lightning, Marjorie finally set the transportation fee at twice the usual price. If it were any other merchant, they would definitely think that this was a foolish transaction. Just the transportation fee alone was more than the value of the goods. The average transportation fee for 2 people was 1 gold royal. According to the current market price, one could buy several strong and high-quality slaves with that kind of money. Marjorie had also raised this question to him, but Roland still insisted on bringing this group of people back to the Western region. From the moment they followed the emissary delegation onto the sailboat, they were already considered as subjects of the Western region, and he had the responsibility to provide them with protection. Moreover, in Roland's eyes, the value of these refugees was far greater than that of slaves. After receiving education, training, and re-employment, the wealth they could create in their new jobs would be immeasurable. Back in the castle parlor, Roland ordered the kitchen to serve Marjorie a bowl of thick soup to ward off the cold. "Drink this, and your hands and feet will be much warmer." "Thank you for your kindness." The female merchant scooped up a spoonful and smelled it. "There seems to be white wine in it." "Yes." He smiled. "In addition, there are also pepper and honey, and the base is chicken soup." High alcohol was an excellent drink to ward off the cold at any time, and when heated together with the chicken soup, the taste became more mellow. With the addition of seasonings to cover up the irritating taste, the whole bowl of soup was fresh and slightly spicy, and people who did not drink often could easily drink it. Margaret slowly drank the thick soup and let out a long sigh. "It's really good. Every time I'm on the way to your place, I'm always full of expectations, wondering what new things you'll come up with. It's a pity that I probably won't be able to frequent your territory next year." "Are you referring to the trading opportunities?" Roland keenly captured the meaning of her words. The female merchant nodded. "Timothy has issued an order to ban saltpeter trading. Now saltpeter is not only restricted to King's City, but also to Silver City and Redwater City. In addition to supplying it at a low price to the alchemist's workshop, we can only sell it to the nobles in the city." Roland furrowed his brows. "And according to the information I heard from City Hall, he seems to be planning a complete blockade of the Western region. I'm afraid that not only saltpeter, but also merchants will be blocked at the front line of Redwater City." At that time, not only Border Town, but Longsong's stronghold in Willow Town will also be affected. Although many nobles have expressed their opposition, I don't think Timothy will take back his order. She shook her head helplessly. By next year, not only will I not be able to transport saltpeter and/or ingots here, but even the steam engine trade will probably be suspended. It seems that I've pushed him too far, otherwise he wouldn't have come up with this kind of edict that is equally harmful to the royal family. Roland couldn't help but think, in the absence of complete centralization of power, rashly interfering with the trade activities of other territories is likely to arouse the rebellious mentality of the lords and great nobles. Even if Timothy sent his own troops to guard the land and river routes, it would be easy for the local lords to eliminate them from behind, as long as he enforced this policy for a year and a half. But unfortunately, trade was the Achilles heel of Border Town. Not to mention a year, even half a year was not allowed. Saltpeter was the raw material for large-scale acid production, and before the artificial synthesis of ammonia was solved, its importance was irreplaceable. Once the supply was stopped, the 152mm artillery would become a decoration, and the replacement of the new repeating guns would be delayed. But compared to weapons, the steam engine trade was more critical. Nowadays, there weren't many golden dragons left in the treasury of City Hall. Part of the money earned was used for infrastructure construction and increasing the number of jobs, while the other part was used as salary for the townspeople. Then it was recycled through the trade of food, convenience goods, and housing, forming a cycle. This economic model required a constant injection of golden dragons into the market, at least equal to the wealth created by the people. At present, Border Town was still in a primitive state of accumulation, and there was no issuance of credit currency. Once the steam engine trade income was lost, the finance would easily fall into a situation where the salaries could not be paid, and then the economy would collapse. In any case, the interruption of funds was absolutely unacceptable. This situation won't last long, Roland said, spreading his hands. I believe that you will soon be able to visit this town in the western region again. No, by that time, you should see a brand new city. Marjorie was slightly surprised. Are you going to build a city here? Just after the end of the months of the demons, he laughed. In addition, I intend to open a trade route directly connected to the fjords, not through the Seawanshire or the port of Clearwater, but directly from the Western Territory to the Fjords Islands. I don't know if you are interested in participating? To be continued. Chapter 365. From the Western region? Marjorie asked curiously. I didn't know that there was a good harbor here that could lead to the sea. Not yet, but we can build one. Her eyes widened. Your Highness, are you serious? Of course, we should be able to start building it next spring. Roland smiled. In this era, without exception, seaports were all natural. A man-made harbor was a huge project that required the transformation of the natural landscape, which was almost impossible to achieve. But now he had the full support of Tilly. When the construction of the houses on Sleeping Island was completed, Lotus would return to the western region again. At that time, the demonic beast disaster would recede, and it would be a suitable day to open a port. He got up and pointed to the map hanging behind him. There is a shoal in the south of Border Town. The depth of the water is ideal, and the area is also very suitable. It is enough to accommodate all the facilities needed for the port. As long as it is slightly modified and the coastal mountains are flattened, I can transport goods from the western region by land. Transform the shoal. Flatten the mountains. Why do I have the illusion that these amazing things are not difficult when they come from your mouth? Marjorie said with great interest. But, do you have a merchant fleet? You should know that sea ships are very different from river sailing ships. Not yet, Roland said, spreading out his hands. That's why I hope you can participate in it. You want me to sail the ship? I'll be responsible for both transportation and sales, he added. The western region will only provide goods. This was equivalent to the exclusive distribution rights in the fjords. With Marjorie's experience, she could naturally see the profits involved. Organizing his own caravan to sell to the fjords could naturally make more money. But Roland did not want to invest too much energy and manpower in this area. He just wanted to get new funds as soon as possible to maintain the rapid development of his territory. Once the primitive accumulation was completed, the introduction of credit currency was only a matter of time. Sure enough, the businesswoman blinked and asked excitedly, "Entrust all of it to me?" "If the price is reasonable." Roland nodded. "If you are willing to act as an agent for the overseas trade of the Western region, we can talk about it in detail. The scope of sale is limited to the fjords, and the price must not be lower than the current selling price to the Crescent Moon Bay caravan. Of course, a steamship that can sail continuously without relying on the wind is worth the high price of those cross-sea caravans." Her tone was full of confidence. "If we sell it directly to the Fjord Islands, I'm sure we can double the price. And we can share the extra profits," Roland said with a smile. "In addition, other than the steam engine, there's also this." He clapped his hands, and the guard waiting outside the hall immediately came in with a plate. There were 4 or 5 crystal bottles on the plate, each only the size of a thumb. "This is..." "Open it and smell it." Marjorie curiously opened the cork on the top of the bottle and sniffed it. Her eyes suddenly lit up. "Oh my God, you actually made perfume. I wonder how it compares to the products of the alchemist's workshop in King City. The fragrance seems to be stronger." She held the bottle and looked at it from left to right, apparently unable to put it down. "Is this made by the border town alchemy workshop?" "Almost." Roland also picked up a bottle and put it in the palm of his hand. According to his own requirements, the perfume bottle was made of crystal glass with excellent transparency, and its shape was a standard 6-sided prism. With a slight turn of the bottle, under the light, the perfume inside would change into different shades of color, extremely beautiful. According to the sales philosophy of the later generations, exquisite packaging could greatly improve the quality of the product itself. As a hit product to open the Fjord's market, he naturally had to treat it carefully. Compared to the steam engine, perfume could be described as a real low-cost product. When Evelyn realized that the spiciest white wine was also a kind of wine, high-concentration alcohol was continuously produced from her hands, and even the last step of distillation was omitted. As for roses or other flowers with unique fragrances, they were also transformed by leaf into oily products. Only 2 or 3 of them were needed to be mashed, and the strong fragrance of the flowers could fill a jar of alcohol. "If you like it, these bottles are for you." He put the perfume back on the plate. "Really?" Marjorie laughed. "Then I won't stand on ceremony. I heard that this thing can be sold for a good price in the fjords. You should know that the annual sales of perfume by the Alchemist's Workshop in King City are very limited. The supply of more than 1,000 bottles can't meet the demand. Those big merchants are especially particular about the fishy smell on their bodies, so perfume is a regular product for them. After selling it at the price of 5 golden dragons in King City, it can be sold for 15 to 20 golden dragons in the fjords. In fact, a large part of the perfume sold to other areas will also be taken away and resold by the merchants across the sea." At this point, Marjorie paused. "I don't know how many bottles of perfume your alchemy workshop can produce in a year. If the raw materials are sufficient, it should be about 10 times that of the alchemist's workshop in King City." Roland deliberately lowered the number. He didn't want to sell his profiteering goods like cabbages, nor did he want to earn only 4,000 or 5,000 gold coins a year. As a competitive product alongside the steam engine, he hoped that perfume could bring back an equal amount of profit. The female merchant was speechless for a while, then sighed with emotion. "Your territory is really full of incredible things. So are you willing to act as my agent to sell these goods?" "Of course, Your Highness." She stood up and bowed. "For me, this is also a rare opportunity." After reaching a general agreement, the specific details and terms of the contract were handed over to Barov to discuss in detail. Roland returned to his office, ready to write a letter to Theo, who was lurking in King's City. Whether it was to take the initiative to overthrow Timothy, or to open up a new trade route, it was a two-legged plan. He didn't want to put all his eggs in one basket. In case his attack failed, he also hoped to continue to obtain saltpeter. This way was to produce it himself. In the letter, in addition to mentioning his own intention to attack, Another point was to let Theo contact the saltpeter factories around King's City and purchase a group of saltpeter workers to send to the Western Territory. This year, the saltpeter merchants certainly didn't have a good time. While Timothy prohibited the export of saltpeter, he also forced them to sell to the alchemist's workshop at a low price. As a result, the profits of the saltpeter factories would naturally fall again and again. Roland believed that as long as the remuneration was generous enough, it wouldn't be difficult to buy the factory along with the workers. The principle of saltpeter production wasn't complicated. Now that the population of Border Town was constantly increasing, it could also satisfy the large amount of excrement needed by the saltpeter factories. The conditions for self-production had already been met. Before defeating Timothy, it would undoubtedly be the most stable and secure point of security. Chapter 366. The snow outside the window became heavier. Snowflakes the size of fingernails fell from the sky. Looking at it, the sky above the town was full of snowflakes. Gray fairies fluttered in the wind and fell densely to the ground, merging with the white roofs and tree branches. Such a scene would make people feel cold. But the colder it was, the warmer Tilly felt. She leaned against the back of the recliner, half of her body covered by a soft blanket, and her feet were in the fire barrel. This convenient heating device was invented by Roland Wimbledon. The square wooden barrel was level with the chair, and there was a charcoal brazier in it, separated by a horizontal wooden fence. It was not like a burning bonfire, where one would easily be burned if they were too close, and would not feel much heat if they were too far away. As long as one put one's feet on the wooden fence, one could enjoy the warmth of the charcoal fire at close range, and then cover one's body with a quilt, as if it was surrounded by warmth. The heavy snow outside the window served as a foil to the coziness in the room. Probably the happiness produced by the contrast was the most impressive. It had to be said that the treatment of the witches here was completely different from a year ago. It was not difficult to understand why they did not want to leave the town, because even she herself enjoyed this moment. In addition to her, there was also Anna and Agatha in the room. This was originally Anna's bedroom. Taking advantage of the rare leisure time, Tilly would come to the door with a book and ask Anna for advice. At first, it was only the two of them, but now there was an ancient witch who had woken up from the ruins. Anna simply moved the fire barrel from the table to an empty space in the room, and asked Roland to add 2 more reclining chairs. The 3 of them sat around the fire barrel, their feet leaning against each other, and together they studied the new knowledge that would open their eyes to a whole new world. Of course, most of the time it was just them asking questions, and Anna answering. It's hard to believe that such a book was written by a mortal. Agatha closed Natural Science Theoretical Foundation, and took a deep breath. The more I read, the more I feel that the world seems to be like this. There is a hidden rule in all the chaos, and everything follows the same rule. Even if he was born in Tequila, the Union will certainly include him. Maybe he will have the same status as a senior witch. At first, she had many doubts about the contents of the book, but with Anna's careful answers, Agatha's attitude towards Roland had changed dramatically. However, Tilly believed that this change was only for Roland. The other mortals were probably still stupid in their eyes. Thinking of this, she could not help but sigh. Only she knew that this knowledge did not belong to Roland Wimbledon, but to someone else, someone who had suddenly appeared in her mind. After spending the past few days with Sylvie, Tilly basically confirmed this statement. But in this way, proving that he was still himself was an impossible task. And the most suspicious point was that he really didn't know where these memories came from, and who they belonged to. It was hard to believe that one's memories could be completely separated from one's life. At the very least, he couldn't do this. As long as he recalled the knowledge taught by the court tutor in his mind, relevant scenes of that time would always flash before his eyes. Where did he learn all this knowledge from? Agatha sighed. I thought the mortal's research had reached such a depth, but after a few days of observation, it seems that there is not much difference from 400 years ago, even a little behind. I don't know, Tilly shrugged. Anyway, he couldn't have learned it from the palace. What kind of person was he before? This question made Anna also raise her head. Before. Tilly pondered for a moment. arrogant and timid, doing things his own way, ignorant and incompetent, with a terrible personality. Probably the only good thing about him is that he didn't use his identity as a prince to do anything evil. Well, the level of mortals? No, among mortals, he is also a terrible guy, she complained. Even though he suddenly improved after coming here, it is still hard to figure out what he is thinking. He keeps everything bottled up in his stomach and wants others to believe him. How is that possible? The room suddenly became quiet. What's wrong? Tilly felt that the gazes of the two were a little strange. No. Nothing. Anna covered her mouth and laughed. This is the first time I heard you say this. Damn it, she realized that she had said too much. This kind of complaint should not come from the mouth of an ally. Perhaps she had been too relaxed recently. I mean, it's okay, His Highness doesn't care about this kind of thing. Anna shook her head and smiled. Maybe he also has his own difficulties. Roland. Tilly hesitated for a moment. Didn't he mention this to you? No, Anna said indifferently. I didn't ask. If he wanted to say it, he would have said it. She sighed in her heart. For him, from the first time he met the prince, he should be the changed Roland, so it was meaningless to think about this problem. From what you said, he is a completely different person from before? Agatha asked with great interest. There is a saying in the Quest Society that the more extraordinary a person is, the more he will have different quirks from ordinary people. Maybe this kind of change is a normal phenomenon. When Roland was in the palace, did he howl at the moon or stare at the wall for a long time? What kind of quirks are these? Tilly shook her head helplessly. In the past, he was no different from ordinary people, except that he was a little unruly. But I also heard people mention that he once shouted in public that he wanted to marry a witch. It was probably because of these words that Gerald and Timothy always tormented him in the name of purifying the devil's minions. Moreover, my father also didn't like this kind of behavior, so his character became more and more unruly. Because he wanted to marry a witch and was discriminated against? Agatha curled her lips. This is a great dream in tequila. Of course, there are very few people who succeed. Most witches don't want to live with only one man for the rest of their lives. But we are different from 400 years ago. If he married a witch, he wouldn't have children to inherit everything from him. How could father have a good impression of this idea? Tilly sighed. But it has been more than 10 years. He should have long forgotten the stupid words he said. Really? Anna suddenly said. But he is still willing to marry a witch. Well, does he remember? Wait. Tilly couldn't help but stare. You mean now? Yes. She smiled gently. His Highness Roland said it himself. Tilly suddenly froze in place. Chapter 367. Perrault yawned and sat up from the bed. His upper body immediately felt a chill. If he could, he wished to stay under the covers. Not only was it warm, but he also had Shirley's company. Don't you want to sleep a little longer? The woman beside him turned over and murmured sleepily. It's still early, isn't it? He leaned over and kissed her forehead. Shirley's brown hair was soft and curly, her skin was as smooth as a baby's, and she had a pair of adorable big eyes. It was in the long opera house that he had first met her. Almost as soon as he saw her, he had been attracted by her eyes. It should be noon soon. I have to go downstairs to see if there are any official matters to attend to, Perrault said in a low voice. If you don't want to get up, you can continue sleeping. I'll ask the servants to send lunch to the bedroom later. But I want you to accompany me. Shirley stretched her arms over and hugged his waist. It's snowing outside anyway. What official matters can there be? What she said was true. Ever since the months of demons arrived, the entire city had suddenly quietened down. The opening of the theater became once a week, the merchants in the market all left, and the taverns closed their doors. If one were to walk on the streets during the day, one would even think that this was an empty city. So should I sleep a little longer? After pursuing Shirley for nearly a year, he finally got what he wanted. Perrault was a little reluctant to leave. The pleasure of the night before had exhausted him, and now he was full of energy again. After lunch, perhaps he could have another round of lovemaking. Just then there was a knock on the bedroom door. "Sir Perrault, there's a blue letter." He was startled, then immediately rolled over and got off the bed. He picked up the robe that had been thrown on the ground and put it on. "I'll be right there, sir," Shirley said in a low voice. "Wait for me." Perrault hurriedly fastened his belt and left the bedroom. After a while, he returned to the room and climbed under the covers again. There was a letter wrapped in a blue envelope in his hand. "What's this? Who wrote it to you?" The woman had basically woken up. She yawned and sat up to lean against Perrault. "From Border Town," the latter replied. "It should be a personal letter from His Highness." He opened the envelope and took out the letter. He quickly scanned the contents and frowned. "His Highness asked me to go to Border Town." "Now," Shirley said in surprise. "You're going in this weather?" "Well, it's probably something urgent." Petrov sighed. "I'll pack up and leave in the afternoon. Go home first. I'll find you when I'm back." He couldn't help but remember a year ago, when he had braved the wind and snow to take a boat to Border Town to bring Duke Ryan's warning to Longsong's stronghold. But now, the reason he had to go to the barren land was because of a letter from the town lord. Petrov couldn't help but lament the fickleness of fate. "Can't you just pretend you didn't see it?" she said unhappily. "Even if he captured Longsong's stronghold, you're the real ruler of the stronghold. Even if it's the king's order, you don't have to carry it out immediately, do you? If it were the Duke, he would have done so." But Perrault knew Prince Roland's temperament well. He touched the prince's head dotingly. "That's different. The king may not be able to control the western region, but His Highness Roland can. He's not only the lord of Border Town, but also the master of the entire western region." After entering the months of demons, Longsong's stronghold indeed did not have too many official affairs to handle. Petrov simply assigned some tasks to his subordinates, and conveniently brought his father, Earl Hull, to the castle to assume command before leaving the castle. Unlike the last time when he only had one assistant with him, this time he rode on the Duke's personal ship, the Lionheart. He brought along more than 10 servants and apprentices, as well as 2 family knights. It could be said to be a formidable force. Just as he passed through the streets of the outer city and headed for the stronghold pier, a noise from the corner of the street attracted Perrault's attention. A dozen or so people were gathered in a circle, as if they were watching something. Judging from their attire, they seemed to be commoners. They were probably nearby residents who were attracted by the noise. Occasionally, someone in the circle would say something like, "Devil! Hang her!" Such a shrill roar. Perrault thought of something and said to the knight beside him, "Go and have a look. If it's just an ordinary dispute, tell them to go back to their houses." "Yes, my lord." The knight pushed through the crowd, walked to the center, and pulled out his sword. The crowd quickly dispersed. He finally brought back a woman and 2 children, one of whom had a hemp rope tied around his neck. "What's going on, my lord?" The woman threw herself at Perrault's feet. "Kill her quickly. She's degenerated into a witch." The word surprised Perrault. "A witch?" Roland shifted his gaze to the other 2. The taller boy immediately stood in front of the girl, looking as if he was ready to pounce on her at any time. However, his face was bruised, and it was obvious that he had been beaten badly. "She's not the devil's minion at all. It's shown in the play that there are good and bad witches. What right do you have to punish her? Are you sure she's a witch?" Perrault ignored the boy and continued to ask the woman. "Yes, my lord. Don't be fooled by the plays in the plays. If the church was still here, they wouldn't be able to tolerate their nonsense on the stage. This animal is also a little devil. I'm punishing her on behalf of the church. My lord, please strangle her to death, so that the breath of hell won't spread to Longsong City. Get to the point," he scolded. Chapter 368. After the heavy snowfall of the months of demons, the Redwater River became the only passable road in the entire western region. Compared with the small sailboat they had boarded before, the Lionheart was much more spacious and could accommodate a simple kitchen. Even while sailing, they could still eat hot food. His bedroom was naturally the Duke's separate room, located at the stern of the ship, similar to the poop of a ship. Through the window, He could see the constantly flowing river, and the floating ice flows from time to time. "My lord, the egg soup you ordered," the knight said as he brought the earthen pot and porcelain bowl to his room. "Thank you for your hard work," Perrault nodded. "You should also sit down and have a bowl to warm up." Since His Royal Highness had taken all the knight of the other 4 families to Border Town, and informed them that they would not be redeemed, the first thing the nobles did was to send the families of the knight to Border Town as well. The vacated land was either used to recruit a new knight or to simply take it for themselves. Only the Honeysuckle family did not suffer too many losses in this war. Instead, by acting as the representative of Longsong's stronghold, they rapidly grew stronger and now steadily surpassed the 4 families. They also had a relatively complete knight team. Seth the Knight was a member of the team. Although he was not as well known as the Light of Dawn, he could still be regarded as one of the more outstanding young knight. "Yes," he smiled, opened the lid of the earthen pot, and poured the soup for Perrault. "But, my lord, is it really okay for you to do this?" "You mean the witches?" "Well, although the church was burned, it's not difficult to build another one. The church will return to the western region one day. As long as you put all the blame on Prince Roland, they won't be able to say anything. But you saved a witch in front of the public, and even arrested a believer of the church." The knight hesitated. "This is tantamount to openly opposing the church. Since it's not difficult to build another one, why is that place still in ruins?" Perrault blew on the fragrant egg soup. "The church will not return to the western region." Seth blinked, as if he didn't quite believe this conclusion. When the heat of the egg soup subsided, he took a small sip and exhaled a puff of white air in satisfaction. As a manager, the most important thing is to understand the true intentions of the person in charge. His Highness had implemented education in Longsong's stronghold, used the recruits trained in Border Town, and staged an obvious drama. It was obvious that he wanted to weaken the influence of the church to a minimum. "Since I became the manager of the fortress because of His Highness, I naturally have to manage the fortress according to his wishes. If I can't even see this, I'm afraid he will immediately replace me with someone else." Perrault shrugged. "It's a piece of cake to stop the church from being rebuilt. The stonemasons and carpenters should have been warned. Even if some believers want to build their own, the rats will stop them from working. But the church, since His Royal Highness has done so, it means that he is not afraid of the church's revenge at all, or he has the confidence to keep the church out. If they are able to step into the western region again, it can only mean that His Royal Highness has failed. If he fails, I won't be able to sit on the main seat of the fortress anymore. You should understand this." "Do you think that Prince Roland can defeat the army of the church?" Seth asked in surprise. "Who knows?" Perrault smiled and shook his head. "A year ago, I'm afraid no one thought that he could resist the Duke of Ryan's knight regiment." He stood up and picked up the jar. "I'll go check on that little girl. She might be hungry." The girl's name was Paper. There was no doubt that only a street child would use such a casual name. Since she had boarded the ship, she had stayed in the cabin below the deck without saying a word. Even when her fingers were red from the cold and her body was shivering, she did not make a sound. To be on the safe side, Perrault had put the god's locket of retribution on her. After all, no matter how much His Highness claimed that witches were no different from ordinary people, he did not completely believe that a person with such incredible power could really be the same as an ordinary person. Even a careless move could cause harm to herself. "Why don't you lie down under the quilt?" Perrault pointed at the hammock hanging in the cabin. The space in the cabin was limited, so the sailors usually slept in a suspended hammock with a thick linen quilt. It was not very comfortable, but at least it could keep them warm. "It'll get dirty," she said in a low voice. "A sailor can't be any cleaner than you." He found a relatively dry place to sit down. "This journey will take 3 days. Do you plan to sit like this all the time? I'm afraid you'll die on the road before we reach Border Town." "Border Town?" Paper was stunned. "Didn't I tell you? We're going to a place suitable for witches to live." Perrault opened the jar. "Drink some hot soup and then lie down in the hammock." This time the girl did not refuse. It was obvious that she was starving. She picked up the jar and drank directly, not afraid of burning her tongue. Perrault shook his head. Her body was as thin as a monkey's, and the dirt on her hair had already solidified. Her clothes, which had several holes in them, were probably picked up from somewhere. From her appearance, she looked no different from the many street children in Stronghold. "Who's the boy who's protecting you?" he asked. "Your street child friend? Snaketooth. He often brings us food." Paper swallowed the soup, stuck out her tongue, and said vaguely, "As long as I go with you, you won't catch him, right?" "He's not a witch." "Of course," Perrault said expressionlessly. "He doesn't matter at all." He was a little surprised to hear that Paper often brought him food. It was rare to see such people in the slums. The lack of food led to robberies from time to time. When one could not even survive, who would have the mood to care about others? Also, the name Snaketooth sounded a bit like rat style. Thinking of this, he could not help but ask, "You just said that besides you, are there other witches?" "No." Paper shook her head. "We're all orphans in the neighborhood." This made Perrault feel a little relieved. What's that old faker talking about using her ability to clear the snow? It's the first time I've seen a witch dare to use her ability in front of others. Snaketooth suggested it. He said I could help the residents clear the snow on their roofs quickly, and at the same time, exchange for some food so that everyone wouldn't starve. People are no longer afraid of witches now because the drama theater is full of witches' stories. As long as I'm willing to do it, he'll negotiate with the adults. So that's how it is. Perrault could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. This girl is quite interesting. She knows how to make good use of her resources, but she underestimates the influence of the church. "Did you get anything to eat?" "Well." Paper lowered her head. "I swept 3 roofs. One house kicked me out, and the other 2 gave me half a piece of bread and a pancake. But when it came to the 4th house," Petrov patted her head and said, "Have a good rest after you've finished drinking. I'll send someone to inform you when it's dinner time." 3 days later, the Lionheart arrived at the pier of Border Town. Chapter 369. When Perrault stepped out of the cabin, he did not smell the expected rotten wood smell. The pier on the side of the ship was obviously newly built, and the old dock had more than doubled in size. It no longer squeaked when he stepped on it, but made a reassuring thumping sound. Apparently, the joints between the planks were very strong, and the material was quite thick. When he walked down the dock, several uniformed guards immediately came up to him. The leader of the guards looked at the family emblem hanging on the mast of the Lionheart. "Are you Sir Hull of the Honeysuckle family?" "Yes." Perrault nodded. This kind of question was very useful to him. "I'm Perrault Hull. I came here at His Highness' invitation. Sir Ironaxe has already told us. Please follow me." The guard made a gesture. "On foot?" Roland was slightly startled. "Yes, the stables have been demolished." The guard smiled embarrassedly. "Don't worry, the roads in the town are very easy to walk on." Perrault quickly understood what the guard meant by easy to walk on. The dark streets were flat and spacious. The snow on them had been swept away, and not much water could be seen. The road seemed to be made up of many black stones with small gaps in the middle. After being soaked in water, it looked clean and translucent. What surprised him the most was that there was more than one such path. Every 100 steps, he could see a straight and crisscross fork. The degree of regularity was like a square drawn with a pen. After walking for half an hour, he did not see a single piece of muddy land. Perrault was surprised to find that this town was completely different from what he remembered. "Sir, is this really Border Town?" Seth's eyes widened as he looked around. "Didn't they say that this place is just a temporary shelter for mining?" "It used to be like this," the guard said with a smile. "But since His Highness came, everything began to change. The roads in the town were all built half a year ago. At that time, thousands of people were busy every day, and one could be built almost every month." Perrault noticed the pride in his tone, as if he was proud to be a member of the town. However, this was too inconceivable. Along both sides of the street were large trees, and he could imagine what it would be like once the summer came, when the green foliage would shade the sun overhead. And then the houses, no sign of the low mud huts or the ramshackle wooden inns, and all round were angular brick houses. each 2 or 3 stories high, of almost the same design, and evidently built by the same masons. How could he transform a barren town into such a state in a year's time? With surprise and confusion, Perrault followed the guards into the castle area. The guide was changed to a knight in armor, and his attendants were all left outside the wall. It was only when he stepped into the castle that Perrault found the feeling he had a year ago. This place didn't seem to have changed much. Compared to the Duke's fortress, the prince's castle was obviously much smaller. The knight pushed open the door to the living room, and made a gesture of invitation. He soon saw the prince sitting on the main seat. His Royal Highness Roland Wimbledon. "Welcome to Border Town," Roland said with a smile. "Mr. Ambassador." It seems that His Highness hasn't changed much. Perrault felt inexplicably relieved. He raised his hand to his chest and respectfully saluted. "The Honeysuckle family pays tribute to you, Your Highness." "Sit down," the other nodded. "I called you here because of a very important matter. This matter concerns the future of the entire western region, and naturally includes Longsong Stronghold." "Please say it." "I intend to build a city here. The city's scope extends to the Misty Forest in the west and Longsong Stronghold in the east, encompassing half of the western region. At that time, Longsong Stronghold will exist as a stronghold in the east of the new city, and it will also be the first line of defense against the Church's army, unlike the current independent city," Roland stated in an orderly manner. "In this vast territory, the same law must be implemented and unified under the management of the new city hall. No nobles can intervene in the affairs of the city, and the 5 families of the western region are no exception." Perrault felt a fierce shock in his heart. A year ago, he also had the same idea, to let the Duke of Ryan move the line of defense against the demonic beasts to Border Town, and at the same time use the land between the 2 places. But he didn't expect that a year later, the prince would actually use this method, and the method was even more thorough than he had imagined. Turning Longsong Stronghold into a part of a city? Just by imagining it, he could understand how amazing the scale of this city would be. He subconsciously wanted to raise doubts, but just as the words were about to come out of his mouth, he swallowed them back. Since His Highness had told him about this matter, there was no doubt that he had already made a decision, and now no one could stop him from implementing this plan. Perrault didn't even think about rebelling against the prince. The crushing defeat of the Duke of Ryan left a strong impression on him, and he even felt that this gray-haired man couldn't be defeated. At least, he couldn't be defeated. So the only thing he could do was to seek his own interests in this huge change. "You said that the 5 families can't intervene in the affairs of the city, so how can the Honeysuckle family serve you?" The prince was silent for a long time until Perrault felt a little uneasy. Then he chuckled and said, "You really surprised me, Mr. Ambassador." Whether it was the previous offer to redeem Longsong Stronghold, or the current positive attitude, it's a rare wise decision from the nobles. After sighing, he stopped smiling and said seriously, "As long as the Honeysuckle family is willing to accept my management, you can continue to assist me in managing the Longsong area. Whether it's me or my father, we've always followed your will." "I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the territory," Roland interrupted. "From now on, the nobles who accept my protection will only have the ownership of the territory, but not the right to govern it. Whether it's the law enforcement or other policies, they will all be subject to the decree issued by the city hall." Perrault hesitated. "The territory can be inherited from generation to generation, just like the title of nobility, and your family can also run farmland, workshops or other businesses. These industries, together with the land, belong to the Honeysuckle family, and will not be invaded by others. This is also the protection I promised. Apart from the right to govern, the land you own will not change at all, and it will even flourish under the stimulation of the new policy." The prince continued, "Of course, you can also choose to return to your own territory, and continue to be a feudal noble in the traditional sense. But when I finish the expansion of the new city and expand outwards, the territory will no longer belong to its original owner." Chapter 370. Do you think he will agree? Nightingale asked after Perrault left. "I don't know. His promise alone won't help much. We still have to convince Earl Hull. Roland took a sip of hot tea. If he still intends to be a feudal noble, then I can only say that it's a pity. You can't bear to, can you? She teased. Of course not. Roland curled his lips. Among the nobles he is not inflexible, he knows how to seize opportunities, and he is also very good at business. As long as he trains in Longsong Stronghold for a year or so, he will definitely become an excellent official. If he manages to convince Earl Hull, do you really intend to hand the king's city over to him? If I unify the kingdom of Grey Castle, the king's city will naturally have to move to another place. Furthermore, the cities that are too far away from the western region should be managed by people from the western region, so my conditions are not empty talk. At the end of the conversation, Roland revealed to Perrault that he would not infeff any nobles in the future. Furthermore, after the integration of Grey Castle, the whole kingdom would follow the model of the new city and implement the same laws and policies. All power would be vested in the central government. If he decided to stay, Longsong Stronghold was far from the end of his political career. It was not impossible for him to take charge of a big city or become the chief bureaucrat of the central administrative office. As for how far he could go, that would depend on his own ability. Roland hoped that the other party could understand the expectation contained in his words. Well, I don't understand these things anyway. Nightingale patted his shoulder. But the new witch will be here soon, so it's better for you to leave for a while. You're the only one asking? I'll call Vendi over. The voice beside him chuckled. She's better at this than I am. For the sake of safety, mainly due to Scroll's suggestion, the Witch Union had to first have Nightingale confirm the witch's identity before accepting a foreign witch. Due to the need to remove the God Stone of Retaliation to detect lies in the state of fog, Roland could not be present, in case the other party suddenly launched an attack and caused an accident. Scroll had even come up with 10 general questions for identification, such as where are you from, your real name, do you know the prince, do you have any hostility towards the prince, and so on. Considering that Nightingale could only judge the truth of her own beliefs, and was unable to see through a lie that she was certain of, these questions were probed from all angles, leaving almost no blind spots. Even if he could fool one or two of them, he wouldn't be able to answer all of them. Roland himself didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but considering that the witches had good intentions, he could only let them be. After leaving the reception room, he returned to his office and immediately called for Barov, the city hall manager. Perrault's report on the discovery of a new witch in Longsong Stronghold made him aware of his own negligence. Although he had sent Nana to the ceremony and officially declared the existence of witches in Border Town, there had never been a government decree that directly explained the treatment and status of witches. Therefore, it was also possible that a situation like the one in Longsong Stronghold would occur in Border Town. After knowing that he had awakened as a witch, he still chose to hide his identity, rather than taking the initiative to stand out. As soon as Barov entered the door, Roland ordered, I want to issue a long-term recruitment notice. The content will be written on this draft paper. He took the draft document and quickly looked through it. You want to recruit witches with a monthly salary of 1 golden dragon? Yes, Roland nodded. This is also the standard salary of the Witch Union. The monthly salary of 1 golden dragon was definitely the highest salary in this era. The salary level of Border Town was generally higher than that of other cities. The highest starting salary for an acid factory worker had already climbed to 20 silver royals, while a witch's salary was 5 times that. This recruitment not only explained the treatment of witches, but was also equivalent to affirming their status. Since you want to get more witches, why don't you mobilize the people to find them? Barov asked. Just like before when you let the people report spies, they are the sharpest eyes. Now even the chief steward has learned the people's war in the vast sea trick. The prince held back his laughter and waved his hand. Then I will give them a bonus? Isn't that the same as the church's practice? But, you are doing this to recruit witches, not to hang them. Even if that's the case, the witches who are exposed by the public may think that I'm forcing them. You should know that this year's new witches haven't experienced persecution, so their situation can't be compared to that of the witches outside, Roland said noncommittally. I hope that they will voluntarily come forward and contribute their strength to Border Town. In addition to the individual wishes of the witches, he was more worried that if the government decreed that there would be a reward for the discovery of a witch, as well as a reward for the birth of a witch, it was likely to lead to a new round of reporting, or to turn the birth of a witch into a business. Giving birth to a witch was not as good as hard work. In a short period of time, it could greatly change the status of the witches, but in the long run, this policy would have a negative impact on the slogan of "Get rich through hard work" in Border Town. Therefore, a simple recruitment of witches could effectively avoid this situation. Barav had just bowed and retreated when Vendi came in and handed the results of the inquiry to the table. "Your Highness, the identity has been confirmed. It is basically the same as what the eldest son of the Honeysuckle family said. There is no problem." "See," Roland said with a smile. "You are too careful." "But this caution is necessary," Vendi insisted. "Your personal safety is the first thing we need to ensure." "Well," Roland suddenly felt touched and took a deep breath. "Then bring her in." The girl was about 15 or 16 years old, with dirty dark brown hair and eyes that revealed timidity and panic. It was probably the first time she had walked into a carpeted room, and she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. According to the results recorded on the paper, she called herself Paper, and was born on the outskirts of Longsong Stronghold. 3 years ago, after a heavy snow, she became an orphan. This kind of experience was probably similar to that of most of the homeless children in the western region. They would either die fighting for food, or join the underground rats and become thieves, thugs, or scapegoats. Roland didn't know what to say for a moment. She didn't have a strong ability to adapt like Agatha, nor was she as strong-willed as Anna. Even Mystery Moon and Lily, who were similar to her, had sisters from the Witch Cooperation Association as companions. As a little girl in a strange place, she was probably still in a state of panic, and it would probably take a long time for her to adapt to her new life. Moreover, from Perot's report, it could be seen that the ability to melt snow quickly was related to the temperature. In any case, he wasn't in a hurry to test her ability, and he could slowly understand her through getting along with her. Thinking of this, he looked at Vendi. The long voyage must have exhausted her. Take her to take a bath, and let her rest for a while. Arrange her room in the witch building. And as for the matters related to magic power, I will leave it to you to teach her. Is that okay? Of course, she smiled. As you wish. Chapter 371. The bathtub in the bathroom was steaming. Vendi smeared the wet soap all over the little girl's body, including behind her ears, under her armpits, and between her fingers. Seeing the stains slide off along with the bubbles, revealing the delicate skin underneath, she felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction. She hadn't experienced this feeling for a long time. When the Witch Cooperation Association was on the run, every new witch who was in a panic or had fallen into despair was under her care. She was the one who restored their calm and rekindled their hope for a better life. Leaf was like this, Lily was like this, and Nightingale was also like this. But since coming to Border Town, the witches' lives had undergone earth-shaking changes, and everyone no longer had to worry about survival. She wasn't saying that this wasn't good, and she was very grateful for what Roland had done for her sisters. However, without the witches who needed to be taken care of, even Mystery Moon had become more cheerful, which made Vendi feel a little lost. Now she finally felt the joy of being a big sister again. Close your eyes, I'm going to shower. Yes, the other party's voice was light and soft, just like the water droplets sliding down the grass. She had to say, His Highness' decision was really great. The water streaked through the girl's hair, flowed down her back, and carried away the grayish-brown foam. It wasn't until she rinsed 3 times that the color of the water returned to normal. Without the cover of clothes, her thin and weak body was completely reflected in Vendi's eyes. What a thin and weak child, Vendi couldn't help but think. Her spine was protruding from her back, her arms were so thin that one could hold them with one hand, and her skin wasn't white, but had a pale yellow color caused by long-term starvation, which was completely inconsistent with the name Paper. Fortunately, she was a witch, and as long as she took good care of herself, It wouldn't take long for her to return to normal. After her body was washed clean, the next step was to enjoy the bath. Vendi tested the temperature of the water and carried her into the bathtub. The slightly scalding hot water immediately engulfed the two of them, but as long as they endured the initial discomfort, they would soon feel the happiness of being surrounded by warmth. Paper couldn't help but let out a low moan. It had probably been a long time since she'd had a hot bath. Her arms, which were tightly hugging Vendi, gradually relaxed. Vendi spun the girl around in a half-circle, letting her sit in her arms. She then carefully parted her hair, which had been bunched up into a ball. "When did you discover that you were a witch?" 2 years ago, Paper said in a low voice. "I think it was also winter." "That's not surprising," Vendi said with a smile. "Most witches will awaken during the months of the demons, because rumor has it that magic is the most abundant during this time. Isn't it the power of demons?" "Of course," she patted the other's head. "Becoming a witch is a very, very normal thing. In addition to being able to display incredible abilities, we are not much different from ordinary people. You should know that hundreds of years ago, witches were regarded as the favored children of the gods." "Really? It's absolutely true. In fact, there was still quite a big difference between the two, such as the overall improvement in appearance and body, as well as the inability to bear children," Vendi thought. However, she could slowly teach her about these things in the future. "Then what is magic power?" Paper asked timidly. "It's a naturally occurring power, like the radiance of the sun, which is everywhere." Vendi thought for a moment. That's not right. The sun still sets, but magic power doesn't. In short, you just have to treat it as a part of your body, a part that will continuously grow. Continuously grow? That's right, it will become stronger as you grow older. In order to accommodate it, you must also increase your body's endurance, otherwise you will suffer a backlash. She explained carefully. The church used this to their advantage, falsely claiming that witches were devoured by the power of demons. In fact, they were completely wrong. As long as you continue to practice your ability, you can increase the capacity of your magic power without worrying about it affecting your body. If you had awakened as a witch 2 years ago, you would have already passed your first day of awakening. It must have been very painful at that time. The girl nodded twice. "Don't worry, now that you're in Border Town, everything will be fine," Vendi comforted her softly. "If you practice hard, you should be able to pass this year's day of awakening easily." As they were talking, the bathroom door was suddenly pushed open, and Lily ran in with a towel. "I heard there's a new sister?" Where? Mystery Moon said she wanted to see her." "It's obviously you who wants to see her." Mystery Moon, who had been dragged in behind them, rolled her eyes. "If you take a bath now, what if you still have to practice your ability in the afternoon? Don't worry, it's okay to rest for a day. His Highness won't trouble you with anything. You're not Miss Anna." "You traitor." Seeing the two intruding, Paper immediately shrunk her head, half submerging herself in the water. "Oh, this is the new witch." Lily lay on the edge of the bath, looking at her with great interest. "She seems to be about the same age as me, but you can still call me sister." "Why should I call you sister when I'm about the same age as you?" Mystery Moon shouted. "I've never seen you call me that. They're both witches from Border Town." Vendi smiled and introduced them. "Don't be fooled by their current appearance. When they first arrived here, they were basically the same as you. Especially Mystery Moon. She's not much bolder than you, and she always speaks in a soft voice." "Ahem, I'm just worried that His Highness will dislike my ability," Mystery Moon muttered. "His Highness has told me many times that your ability has great potential." Vendi shook her head. "As long as you finish learning elementary physics, you may evolve into an unimaginable ability." "Don't mention those books, she can't even read all the words, and she barely passed the last test." Lily shrugged. "She even asked me to tutor her at night. By the time she learns those strange theorems and formulas in the books, His Highness Roland may have already unified Greycastle, and won't need the help of witches anymore." Ignoring Mystery Moon, who was frowning, Lily looked at the girl in Vendi's arms. "By the way, what's Paper's ability?" "Melting snow." Paper said after a moment of hesitation. What else? Lily asked curiously. Can you turn melted water back into ice? No, Paper said in a low voice. And she can quickly turn hot water into cold water. Is that temperature control? Vendi pondered. But melting snow is warming up, and cooling hot water is cooling down. The two can't be achieved in reverse, and it doesn't feel like it. Have you only tried to use your ability on water? Other things there aren't many changes. Try this, Lily said, holding up a basin of soapy water that had been washed. The girl carefully put her hand into the basin and soon the steaming water cooled down. Then, under everyone's gaze, the muddy soapy water underwent a strange change. The floating bubbles gradually disappeared, and the surging white particles also disappeared. The basin of water became clear and transparent again. Chapter 372. 3 days later, Roland received a positive reply from the eldest son of the honeysuckle family. I'm willing to continue to serve you, and so will the honeysuckle family. He bowed and said, I'll convince my father that he's different from the other families. Is that so? Roland suddenly felt happy. That's for the best. These days, I've witnessed the astonishing changes in your territory. Perhaps this is the city I've been hoping for, Perrault said bluntly. If Honeysuckle can become as prosperous as this, my father won't mind merging the family with the new city. This sentence touched the prince a little. He had originally called him over for 2 reasons. One was that it would be more sincere to explain such an important matter face to face, and the other was to observe his attitude towards the transfer order. He did not expect it to have such an effect. He nodded. Of course, as long as there's time, every piece of land in Grey Castle can become a comfortable place for the people. Then I'll return to Stronghold as soon as possible and tell my father this news. And the other 4 families and all the nobles in the western region, Roland added. As long as the families are willing to accept this condition, the new city will accept them regardless of the past. You can hold a banquet in Stronghold Castle and spread my words. You mean, you want me to inform them? Perrault was startled. That's right, the prince said with a smile. This time, you'll be my ambassador. Yes, your highness. The eldest son of the honeysuckle family bowed with his hand on his chest. Just as he was about to leave, Roland stopped him. By the way, you've done a good job with the witches. Now there's no need to be secretive anymore. Now that universal education has been achieved, those who still have expectations for the church and refuse to come to their senses can all be removed from the western region. As for what to do, you decide. Yes. After Perrault Hull excused himself, Roland stretched himself and continued to look through the statistics of the various projects in City Hall. Due to the heavy snow, the construction of the Kingdom Avenue had been halted, and the construction of the residential buildings had also slowed down. Basically, only some interior decoration work was carried out. Fortunately, Lotus had built a large number of caves before she left, which basically met the needs of the subsequent refugees. Even if the number of refugees continued to increase, they only needed to put more people into each cave. This was the advantage of using the heated Kong. According to the Ministry of Construction, at least 60% of the workers were currently idle, which made some temporary recruitment posts posted by City Hall popular, such as clearing the snow on the streets, transporting or in the furnace district, and so on. In other cities, it was already incredible that there were so many people working enthusiastically during the months of demons. Winter was the hardest for civilians. Most people stayed at home and relied on the food saved in the fall. However, in Roland's eyes, he was unwilling to see so many idle laborers. He thought that perhaps he should do something to make use of all of them. After all, Margaret's Chamber of Commerce had towed away the last batch of steam engines for the year. The City Hall had plenty of money and food, so he had plenty of plans to implement. Thinking of this, Roland asked his guards to summon the Minister of Construction, Car Van Bate. After explaining his idea, Car could not help but widen his eyes. You want stonemasons and masons to build a ship for you? He nodded and said seriously, that's right. The location will be near the dock. We'll build a temporary factory out of wood and light a brazier indoors to ensure the temperature. After it's built, we can push it directly into the water." "But Your Highness, how could they know how to make such a thing?" "Of course, just like the construction of the witch building." Roland took out a piece of paper and drew a diagram. "Set up the formwork, lay the steel bars, pour the concrete. I'll guide you on how to build the first ship, and you'll be responsible for supervising the rest of the ships. This way we can make use of all the workers." Carr looked at the sketch in confusion. "This is a basin?" He couldn't help but smile. "That's right, a huge cement basin." Since Carr did not participate in the construction of Littletown, it was not surprising that he had such an idea. In fact, during the long development of the ship, it had undergone several changes in form, and there were not many inheritances between the beginning and the end. Asking Roland to design a classical wooden ship with a keel, he naturally did not know anything about it. However, building a cement ship was essentially no different from molding a clay model, as long as it could float. The same was true for steel ships. Due to the advancement of welding technology, the majority of modern ships had abandoned the practice of laying keels. Instead, they were pieced together from steel boxes. The whole bottom was loaded, so there was no need to master the manufacturing method of the wooden ship in advance. Regarding the new batch of cement ships, he had already considered it for a long time. Whether it was to mine the coal resources near the snowy mountains or to transport refugees, he needed a batch of inland river ships with a higher load to carry out the task. Therefore, a low-draft flat-bottom design was still the most suitable choice. Compared to the conservative design of Littletown, the new ship could be longer, ensuring the load and stability while increasing its speed. At the same time, in order to reduce the construction difficulty, Roland finally decided to use a paddle wheel propulsion system. This had already been tested on the wooden ship, so it would be easier for the craftsmen to get used to it. "Your Highness, how many people do you plan to invest in building these cement ships?" Carr asked, somewhat awkwardly. "Gather all the idle workers. Just like building a residential building, we can start building several ships at once. In this way, even if the newly assembled steam engine couldn't be sold, it would still have a place to be used. The furnace area could also continue to burn cement without stopping, which could be said to be killing many birds with one stone. In the coming year, if he could have a large-scale cement fleet, no matter where the first army attacked, it would be equivalent to having a reliable logistical support." After explaining this matter, Roland planned to go to the castle's back garden to have a look. The olive trees and grapevines planted by Leaf provided shelter from the wind and snow. If there was no work on hand, the witches would generally practice their abilities in the garden, and the newcomer paper should be no exception. According to Vendi's report, her ability was neither temperature control nor material reduction. Apart from water, it had very little effect on other objects, which made Roland quite curious. Now that 3 days had passed, the little girl should not be as timid as she was when she first arrived, so it would be better to go and see for himself. As soon as he entered the garden, Roland noticed something strange. Within his line of sight, there was lush greenery, as if it was completely isolated from the snow-white world outside. The olive trees were evergreen, and there were vines intertwining between the branches, so it was not strange that the snowflakes could not drift in. But these plants were too full of vitality. Moreover, unlike the silent forest, there was no cold wind blowing, but the grass and trees were gently swaying, orderly and rhythmically. He originally thought it was an illusion, but as he went deeper, he saw the branches of the olive trees droop, as if they were bowing to him, and the grass at his feet fell to one side, as if to welcome his arrival. This feeling made Roland's hair stand on end, and goosebumps appeared on his back. He felt that he was not walking in a garden, but passing through the body of a giant creature. The whole garden seemed to be breathing. Chapter 373. Roland walked to the center of the garden, and was stunned. At the end of the passageway was a small room made of plants. Tree trunks and improved crops formed the walls. Criss-crossing vines hung from the top of the head, as if they had been meticulously woven. Among the green leaves, there were a few clusters of sparkling grapes. There was a bonfire burning in the middle of the room, surrounded by green furniture. If one looked closely, they would find that they were all made of strange plants that grew out of the ground. For a moment, he thought he had come to a fairy tale world. If it were not for the several familiar figures standing by the bonfire, he would really think it was a dream. What's going on? Tilly turned around and showed a look of surprise. Leaf's ability has evolved. She has turned into this garden. Where is she? Roland was surprised. She has integrated with the plants. Tilly looked around. Everything you see in front of you is a part of Leaf. It seemed that it was not an illusion that he was walking in the body of a giant creature. It was just that the giant creature was replaced by Leaf. Roland's heart suddenly tightened. She won't be unable to recover, will she? As long as the ability is removed, I can return to my normal state. Leaf's voice suddenly sounded. However, if one listened carefully, they would realize that it wasn't her speaking. Instead, it was the sound of rustling leaves and the rustling of branches. Her answer made Roland feel a little relieved. You can hear us? Not only can I hear, but I can also see, smell and touch. Leaf seemed very happy. I can feel any changes in the garden, including the birds building their nests on the branches, the insects crawling on the tree trunks. It's hard to describe this feeling. Lady Tilly is right. I am now the garden itself. From the moment you walked in here, I noticed you. As she spoke, a huge leaf rolled up from the ceiling and hung down to Roland's hand. It slowly bloomed, revealing a cup filled with purple-red liquid. The cup was made of 4 overlapping olive leaves. The stem of the leaves formed the handle of the cup, making it look small and exquisite. Roland picked up the glass and took a sip. He found that it was a freshly brewed wine. It was slightly sour with a refreshing sweetness. It seemed that both the wine and the containers came from this garden. Roland drank the toast from the other party, walked to the campfire, and sat on the plant bench with great interest. The support of the bench was made of coarse bark branches, and the surface and back of the bench were covered with a thick layer of wheat leaves. Sitting on the bench was like sitting on a sofa. There was a barbecue grill next to the bonfire, and Andrea was roasting apples and corn for everyone. There was no doubt that these had all been taken from the garden. How did you do all this? Asked the prince, looking up. I'm not sure about the process, the voice replied quickly. I was just taking care of the newly planted crops and your flying messengers as usual, while practicing my abilities, and then they answered my call. This might be the path of fusion that I've been searching for all this time, turning the forest and the life it nurtures into a true whole. What if I use my ability in the concealing forest? Can it also become a part of you? I don't think. She hesitated for a moment. Even if I can, it will take a long time. It doesn't take much magic to maintain this state, and the forest can even replenish it for me. But every time I expand the range of control, I feel that my thinking is sluggish. Sluggish? Roland was stunned. I don't know how to describe this feeling, said Leaf. If I slowly expand the range of control, after a few years, I should be able to become one with the concealing forest. But if I merge with it instantly, I'm afraid I'll lose my mind. When I first merged with the garden, I felt that my brain wasn't enough, as if my mind suddenly became very empty. It took a long time to adapt to it. She paused and added, but the plants that I've already controlled won't feel so unfamiliar when I enter again. I can do it with just a thought. It's really incredible, thought Roland. Compared with Anna and Lily's evolution in the microscopic direction, Leaf's new ability was obviously a breakthrough in the macroscopic direction. If one day she could control the entire concealing forest, no enemy's movements would escape her eyes and ears. Congratulations, said Vendi with a smile. Now the Witch Union has one more evolved witch. According to Agatha, this is equivalent to half the size of the Union. If she were here, she would definitely sigh for a long time. Roland smiled, then looked at the little girl who was peeking at him curiously. Where's Paper? As for her ability, I'm afraid we need to conduct further tests, replied Vendi. But I found a strange phenomenon. With a snap of her fingers, 2 bundles of packed snow quickly fell from the roof. Vendi spread them out one by one, placing one by the bonfire and the other in the corner of the room. She then let Paper use her ability on them. I'm currently teaching her how to use her magic power evenly to achieve a stable effect, just like what you taught me in the beginning. Although she still can't control it precisely, there shouldn't be too much of a difference in general. Roland noticed that the pile of snow near the bonfire quickly melted into a puddle of icy water, while the pile further away had only melted halfway. Vendi carried the puddle of melted water to the wall and knocked on it. The tightly wrapped vines retracted to both sides, revealing a fist-sized hole. The cold wind from outside immediately poured in. Here, use your ability on this again, she said to Paper. The little girl nodded and stretched out her hands. To Roland's surprise, the puddle of snow in the leaves had once again formed a thin layer of ice crystals. Is this speeding up time and bringing forward the results? As soon as the words left his mouth, he rejected his own conjecture. No, time was just a concept humans created for their own convenience. It didn't exist in itself. How could something that didn't exist affect it? I thought so at first, but Lady Tilly said that wasn't the case. Vendi used a vine to hang a rock and shook it in front of Paper. The latter used her ability again, but the pendulum didn't change in speed. It continued to swing left and right at the same rate until it finally stopped. If it's speeding up time, it should swing even faster, right? Indeed, Roland quickly realized the nature of his opponent's ability. She wasn't affecting time, but the movement of particles. Magic power changed the energy level of particles, causing them to decrease or increase. On a macroscopic level, it appeared as freezing or melting. Of course, Paper herself probably didn't understand this at all. She was only using her ability based on what she felt, which was why she came to the conclusion that it didn't have much effect on other objects. Oxidation was a relatively long process, and it would take a longer time to see the results. If his guess was correct, then her ability was a natural catalyst. Chapter 374. A week later, Border Town ushered in the last month of autumn in a heavy snowfall. Roland looked out of the office window and saw black figures moving on the snow-white roofs. This was the daily work of the townspeople. They shoveled the snow from the roofs to the ground, so as not to collapse the roofs. So far, it had been exactly 1 year since he came to this world. But the autumn of the previous year was far less cold, and from here he could not see so many neat and dense houses. At that time, it was not strange to say that the town was about to be abandoned. In addition to a circle of decent-looking wooden houses around the square, there were only broken mud houses and thatched houses. Most of the nobles' residences were concentrated around the square, and the only stone road was from there to the castle. Apart from that, there was no flat ground in the whole town, and human and animal excrement was everywhere. Now all the roads here had been replaced with water-stable pavement. Even without covering it, it was still an excellent quality hard road. The dark lines divided the silver-white town into many squares of different sizes. On both sides of the spacious main road was the planned commercial area, and on the periphery was the residential area. In addition, Border Town's industry was gradually taking shape, or in other words, it had finally changed from workshop production to self-recycling production lines. Of course, it was only limited to the steam engine. The high furnace area could produce iron ingots that met the processing requirements, and the steam plant could process them into parts. The blacksmiths were no longer unfamiliar with all kinds of machine tools, and at the same time they had a large number of apprentices. Although the extremely accurate steam machine tools had to be made by Anna, it was still a very rare progress for them. After all, before this group of people had only touched a blacksmith's hammer, or were simply miners or hunters. For the time being, it could be seen that the workers relied on their own strength to produce. In addition, the production of bullets and gunpowder were all handled by ordinary people. At present, Anna still needed to personally produce firearms. The reason was not because of the lack of processing machines, but because the town's blast furnace could not produce stable quality steel. This had been listed as an urgent problem by Roland in the next stage. The achievements in the chemical industry were much more surprising. Probably because he did not have much hope, any results were a pleasant surprise. Now that sulfuric acid and nitric acid had begun to be mass-produced, and chemical explosives had begun to take shape. As long as the production of bullets could be increased, it wouldn't be difficult to switch to a new generation of repeating guns. It didn't matter if the town's production method was outdated, but for the town's current situation, solving the problem was more important. When Paper's abilities stabilized and she could control her own magic accurately, the chemical industry might reach new heights. The most important thing was that, whether it was in terms of production, education, or construction, Border Town was now moving towards a benign stage of development. As long as there was enough time, the number of educated people would increase, and breakthroughs in various fields would become faster and faster. Using a year's time to turn a barren land into what it was today, he felt a sense of accomplishment from the bottom of his heart. Standing by the window and observing the town, Roland felt that he could look at it for an entire day. At this moment, a melodious bell tolled from the northwest. It was a warning that the demonic beasts would attack. After the arrival of the months of the demons, the alarm would ring every 3 or 4 days. However, the First Army was already used to dealing with this situation, and there was no need for Roland to personally go to the city wall to supervise the battle. Thinking back to a year ago, if he hadn't appeared in the field of vision of the militia, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't throw down their weapons and flee. The demonic beasts are here again. Should I go take a look? Nightingale's voice sounded in his ears. Yes. Roland nodded. Be careful. Don't worry, they can't touch me. Then he felt a slight warmth on his cheeks, and the voice disappeared. Roland shook his head helplessly. It was probably because of the heavy snow that the witches were bored to death. Although they said they were observing the situation, they were actually looking for something to do. In particular, the combat witches brought by Tilly would always go to the city wall to watch the battle, waiting for the hybrid demonic beasts that could rush up to the top of the wall, so that they could show off their skills. Since knowing about this, Nightingale also became interested. Whenever the alarm rang, she would go with them. Perhaps she wanted to compete with the other party to see who was the strongest combat witch. Roland sighed in his heart. He had never seen her so diligent in her studies. However, since fighting side by side could improve the understanding between witches and ordinary people, he was too lazy to stop them. The current revolving rifles could deal with ordinary demonic beasts, but they were still somewhat inadequate against the hybrid demonic beasts. With the powerful witches on the scene, they could effectively stabilize the line of defense and reduce the possibility of casualties. So far, the First Army had not had a single death. Nightingale's departure made his heart move. The combat witches had their own activities to relieve boredom, but the assistant witches didn't have so much fun. Probably, it was time to create some new entertainment activities. Thinking of this, he called Soroya. Your Highness, is there a new task for me to complete? This painter, who had made great contributions to Border Town, seemed to be in good spirits. The freckles on her face had faded a lot, and there was an unconcealable youthful vitality in her smile. Her initiative to ask made Roland slightly suffocated. Why did he suddenly feel a sense of guilt? Have you been busy with work recently? No, why do you ask? Soroya brushed the hair in front of her forehead. Recently, the number of people going to the factory to work has decreased a lot. I can finish the coating in only half a day, and the alchemist Mr. Kyle was busy making those strange metal boxes. She paused, tilted her head and smiled. But compared to the days when I stayed in the camp of the Witch Cooperation Association, I prefer this fulfilling life now. And I am very happy that I can help you with my ability. Oh, this smile is so dazzling. Roland couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Ahem. I called you here to draw some new cards. More Gwent cards. No, you're probably tired of those. He waved his hand. After all, the rules are very simple. If you know the cards in your opponent's hand, there won't be many changes. Well, that's true. You see, the new cards are like this, very simple. Roland took out a piece of white paper and drew a rough sketch. They are divided into 4 suits, and then count from 1 to 13. Finally, add a king and a queen, a total of 54 cards. Soroya's ability had made great progress. She directly used the sketch as a base and quickly drew a hard-coded card. How do I play this? There are many ways to play it, But let's start with the simple one. Roland tried the feel of the poker cards, and immediately found the feeling he had before he traveled to another world. During the spring festival, the most common thing for the family was to sit in the fire barrel, watch the spring festival gala, play poker all night, and light firecrackers in the morning to welcome the arrival of the spring festival. Compared to another traditional entertainment, mahjong, poker didn't have any requirements for the venue. It could be started by putting a board on the leg, and there were many ways to play. It was probably the most popular game in the world. Go and call Anna, Roland said with a smile. I'll teach you fight the landlord. To be continued. Chapter 375. Philin stood behind his wife, watching her carefully selecting the goods in the stall with a smile. Every time she did this, Irene's eyes were always particularly serious. Actually, each piece of meat is calculated by weight, so it doesn't matter which one you choose. No, she firmly refused. You like to eat lean meat, right? But without the fat part, it won't be fragrant enough when cooked. A layer of fat and a layer of lean is the best rib, and it's also very suitable for slicing and frying. You have to choose carefully. Ferlin couldn't help but laugh out loud. Well, you can take your time here. I'm going to buy a bag of wheat first. We still have to queue up for a while. Come and find me when you're done. Okay, Irene replied without looking back. He shook his head helplessly, turned around and went to the grain stall in the convenience market. Since it started snowing, the Lord had erected wooden sheds around the market to block the wind, and specially posted a notice to announce that even in winter, the sales here would not stop. This meant that in the long months of demons, the town would still provide a stable supply of food. For the townspeople, this was undoubtedly a powerful reassurance measure. Compared with the less visited meat stalls, the grain stall was much more crowded. There was a long queue in front of the counter, surrounded by 2 patrolmen in black uniforms to maintain order. But in the town, they had a completely different name: the police. The light of dawn had become accustomed to the various amazing innovations of the Lord, so it was not unusual for him to change the name. And he also knew that most of the civilians had the impression that the patrolmen were no different from hooligans, so changing the name would indeed make people feel different. Mr. Schilt, good afternoon. Someone in the queue recognized him. You also came to buy wheat. Stand by me. I'll give my place to you. No need. Philin waved his hand and stood at the back of the queue. Thank you. You're really popular, the middle-aged man in front of him said with a smile. You deserve to be the former first knight of the Western region. Philin was taken aback. You know that I used to. Haha, of course, this isn't a secret in Border Town. Roland touched his chin and grinned. My son and daughter are very fond of you. Ever since they heard about your origins, my eldest son, Nat, has been clamoring to become a knight. That's all in the past, he shook his head. And His Highness no longer needs the knight. We have the first army, the middle-aged man said nonchalantly. I wouldn't have dared to talk to you like this in the past. Indeed, when he was still a Duke Knight, most civilians didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Behind his back, there were words of envy and respect, but more than that, there was fear. Irene was the only one who dared to look him in the eye and speak bluntly without any regard for her identity. It was that first meeting at the theater that allowed his heart to find a home. After being defeated and captured, Ferlin had come to Border Town. He had thought that he would just be working for a different lord, but he had never expected that he would end up becoming a teacher who taught everyone knowledge. Moreover, he had also gained the respect of everyone. This kind of respect was completely different from what he felt when he was a knight. Instead of avoiding or staying away from him, people hoped to get closer to him. Compared with the respect of keeping a distance, the latter made Philin feel more warm and satisfied. Perhaps he wasn't suitable to be a knight. After waiting for more than a quarter of an hour, it was Philin Schilt's turn. ID card, the clerk said, and then she was startled. Teacher Philin? Betty. He was also a little surprised. The girl standing behind the counter was one of his first graduates. Then Philin quickly understood and said happily, You've entered the city hall? Yes, she said with a happy expression on her face. She nodded and saluted him just like she did in the academy. I'm now an apprentice of the city hall, and I'm currently working in the Ministry of Agriculture. Philin didn't want to keep the people behind him waiting, so he handed over his ID card and 6 silver royals. I want to buy a medium bag of wheat. Okay. She registered his name in the book, turned around and shouted. A porter came out of the warehouse and put a bag of wheat on the counter. No inspection or selection was allowed here. Each bag was already packed and divided into 3 types according to weight: large, medium, and small. The small bag was almost enough for 2 people to eat for a month. The price of food was fixed, and there was almost no fluctuation. You had to show your ID card when buying, and the amount you could buy was also limited. Philin understood that this measure was obviously to prevent people from buying a lot of food, which would cause the civilians who really needed food to be unable to buy. Teacher, come to my house when you have time. Betty handed back his ID card. Yes, Philin responded with a smile. He carried the bag of wheat and walked to the side to make room. Until then, Irene was still nowhere to be seen. She probably had her eyes on other goods. He found an eye-catching and dry place, put the bag on the ground, and sat down to rest for a while. Just then, a blue figure flashed in front of him. The light of dawn was startled, and couldn't help but turn his head to look, and then his whole body trembled. It was a beautiful woman with a delicate face and rare blue hair. She belonged to the type that would never be forgotten at first glance. Philin felt the blood in his body almost freeze. It was not because of the woman's outstanding appearance, but he had seen her in the family hall. When he was a child, he had asked more than once who the portrait hanging on the wall of the hall was, but his father had kept silent. She was undoubtedly a woman, but she was placed in front of all the portraits of his grandfather. He had only heard his father mention her once when he was drunk. If he remembered correctly, the woman in the portrait was the founder of the Schilt family. How could this be? Sorry to keep you waiting. Irene's voice pulled him back from his chaotic thoughts. I picked some eggs and bought a small bag of butter. Did you buy the wheat? Yes, Philin answered absent-mindedly. When he returned home, the scene in the painting was still in front of him, and he couldn't get the woman's figure out of his mind. Why did I meet the ancestor of the Schilt family in border town? After hesitating for a long time, he decided to go back to Longsong's stronghold. When Philin told his plan to Irene, the latter raised her eyebrows. Haven't you already severed ties with the family? Why do you want to go back? Because, he said hesitantly, because of some things. Inheritance? Irene tilted her head. No, is it because of a woman? Ahem. Philin tilted his head. How could it be? But your eyes tell me that you're lying. She pressed the light of dawn on a chair and looked down at him. You promised to be my knight, and I believe that you won't break your promise. That's why I'm so curious. And what can't you tell me? In front of the farmhouse on the outskirts of Longsong's stronghold, we agreed that nothing should be hidden. Her eyes were transparent and moving. She wanted to share everything with him at any time, no matter good or bad. After so many hardships, Irene still hadn't changed. Philin took a deep breath, pulled her into his arms, and softly told her his doubts. I see. After listening to his story, Irene nodded. Then you go. You believe me? It was reasonable to say that even he himself couldn't believe such a bizarre story. An ancestor was actually living in the present. Of course. She blinked. This time you didn't look away. To be continued. Chapter 376. It was reasonable to say that since he had left the family he should not return to Schilt's territory, but Philin did not come to answer his own doubts, but for his father. After the banquet, Sir Schilt not only talked about the woman in the painting, but also seemed very emotional, saying that the family existed because of her kindness, but his grandfather's generation had failed to live up to her kindness. Philin could not understand these words at that time, but his father's expression was still fresh in his memory. It was a kind of regret for what his grandfather had done. Since it was a regret, would there be a chance to remedy it? Perhaps the woman he saw was a descendant of the founder of the family. After all, he left the family because he did not want to be separated from Irene. As the eldest son, the family could not accept him officially marrying a commoner. It was just that the two sides had different choices. It was not that the Schilt family had let him down. After marrying Irene, although Sir Schilt did not come to see him, his mother still sent some daily necessities and a letter, telling his father that he had forgiven him. It was because of these reasons that Philin made the decision to bring the news to his family. Due to the influence of the months of demons, the number of ships going back and forth between Longsong Stronghold had been greatly reduced. It took him 3 days to wait for a merchant ship from Longsong Stronghold, plus the time needed to unload and count the goods. It had already been a week since they arrived at Longsong Stronghold. Walking down the pier, Philin immediately felt the desolation of the city. The snow on the ground was already ankle-high. Except for some footprints of different depths in a few alleys, the snow on the streets was flat, indicating that no one had passed through for a long time. Compared to the bustling border town, it was hard to believe that this was the largest city in the western region. The territory of the Schilt family was close to the north of Longsong Stronghold. It was a village of nearly 2,000 acres. Even the scene in Longsong Stronghold was like this, let alone the village. Walking along the carriage tracks to the mansion, along the way he could see some dead bodies of starving people. The heavy snow in early autumn would catch most of the poor unprepared. No matter if it was food or firewood, half of them might not be able to survive until next spring. This was a normal phenomenon during the months of demons, but Philin could not get used to it. After passing through a few scattered wooden houses, Philin returned to his home after many years. The iron gate of the courtyard was tightly shut, and the front yard was covered with snow. However, several stone paths had been cleared. Clearly, there were still people in the family taking care of the manor. He knocked hard on the iron door, and not long after, 2 guards walked out of the mansion. One of them quickly recognized Philin and said in surprise, You are. Eldest young master. I want to see Sir Schilt, Philin said calmly. Although everyone in the mansion knew that the light of dawn had severed ties with his family, this was, after all, a matter between nobles. The guards did not dare to act on their own. The 2 guards quickly opened the iron gate. One of them led him to the hall to wait, while the other reported to the butler. Philin did not expect that the first one to arrive was his younger brother, Miso Schilt. You don't belong here anymore. Why did you come back? He frowned and looked at his brother. Did you walk here? Where's your squire? I'm not a knight anymore. Philin smiled. Naturally, I don't have a squire. I almost forgot. You were beaten by the prince of Border Town, and became his prisoner. Did he let you come back? Miso snorted. Is it because you don't have money for the winter? I can give you some, and then you can leave. Philin sighed at Miso's attitude. It was not difficult to understand his reaction. Miso Schilt had now become the first heir of the family. Naturally, he did not want Philin to come back to avoid unnecessary trouble. I'm not here for money. I have no intention of competing with you for the position of heir. The light of dawn said in a low voice. His Highness hired me as a tutor. I'm very satisfied with my current life. Tutor? Miso was stunned. Why don't I remember that you have such high knowledge to teach other nobles? Not to teach nobles, but to teach commoners to read and write. To teach commoners. He sneered. The lies you make up are getting more and more interesting. Don't tell me that commoner's wife has bewitched you? Enough. A low voice came from behind. Miso suddenly trembled. Philin followed the voice and found that it was his father, Sir Schilt. Lady Irene is not inferior to the nobles. She only lacks an identity. You'll be rude if you continue. Father, Miso said loudly. Sir ignored his second son. I heard from the guards that you have news for me? Yes. Philin bowed. Then come to my study. Philin followed his father to the study on the second floor of the mansion. When he passed the hall, he took the opportunity to glance at the portrait hanging on the wall in the hall. The face of the blue-haired woman appeared in front of him again. It was almost the same as the person he saw in the convenience market. And unlike the other portraits, the color of this painting was particularly bright, and the details were much more delicate. Even the tear mole at the corner of her eye was clearly visible. After entering the study, Sir took the lead and said, I saw your wife in the autumn theater. She looked very good, and her acting was not inferior to Miss May's. It seems that you have a good life. Philin suddenly felt tears in his eyes. He did not expect his father to mention this first. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "Yes, we have our own residence in Border Town, and we plan to have a child after the end of this year's months of demons." "That's good." Schilt slowly took a sip of tea. "It shouldn't be easy to come from Border Town now. What news do you want to tell me?" The light of dawn restrained his emotions. "I met a woman in the town. She looks exactly like the person in the portrait in the hall." Sir's hand trembled, and he almost knocked over the teacup. He looked up and widened his eyes. "What did you say?" "Rare blue hair and a beautiful face." "I'm sure I'm not mistaken," said Philin. "Could she be a descendant of the person in the portrait?" "Impossible. That person is." He paused and then shook his head. "It's impossible for her to have a descendant." Is that so?" Philin lowered his head. "Then maybe I'm wrong. You came all the way to Longsong Stronghold just for this." "Yes, because I remember that you once expressed regret." Sir Schilt bowed his head and thought for a moment. "Is it really the same? Except for the slightly different hair length?" Philin thought for a moment. "Everything else is exactly the same. You know, since I was born, I've only seen such a hair color in a portrait, so I pay special attention to it." "She can't be a descendant of that person," Sir hesitated. "But she could be the person in the portrait herself." His father's words made Philin almost unable to believe his ears. This idea was even more incredible than his own imagination. "Herself? You mean she has lived for more than 400 years? "I didn't want to tell you this," he said as he got up. "She's a witch. Since she's a witch, anything is possible. Come with me." "Where to?" "In the basement. I have something I want to show you," said the Duke word by word. "It's an inheritance from our ancestors, and it's also a relic she left behind." Chapter 377. Philin was no stranger to the basement of the Schilt mansion. When he was a child, he regarded this place as his own amusement park. It was very fun to rummage through all kinds of dusty boxes to find strange objects. Of course, because of this, he was often beaten by his father, and was even forbidden to enter the basement alone. However, Philin always found a way to sneak in. Sir took him into the innermost stone room, and saw that the walls were inlaid with fist-sized light blue crystals. Philin could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Each stone was actually a superior god stone of retaliation. When he was a child, he didn't know this, but now he naturally understood what it meant. High-quality god stone was very valuable, and a large one like this was worth at least 500 or 600 golden dragon stones. Was the Schilt family so rich? He suddenly remembered that the treasure map was also found in this room. The stone room was surrounded by a circle of boxes, and the layout was not much different from the scene in his memory. Sir Schilt took out a bunch of keys and opened the largest wooden box. With a squeaking sound, the house suddenly raised a cloud of dust. Philin held his breath and looked into the box. It was divided into several layers, similar to the dressing boxes used by noble ladies, and each layer was filled with gems of different colors. "Is this the ancestors' legacy? I haven't visited this place for a long time," Sir sighed. "Every time I see these magic stones, I think of the heavy past of the ancestors." "Magic stones?" Philin was surprised. "Yes, they are precious objects that only witches can use." He nodded. "It's a very long story. Our family was founded under the blessing of a witch." His father began to tell the history of the family, which was different from what he had heard in his childhood. The first ancestor Schilt did not come from the western region, but from the impassable mountain range, where no one had set foot in the wilderness. Philin gradually widened his eyes. He didn't expect that there was such an amazing secret hidden behind the portrait. The founder of the family, Ancestor Agatha, had actually established a huge kingdom with many other witches. In the kingdom, they were in a ruling position, similar to the current nobles. The reason why the kingdom was destroyed was due to the attacks of the devils from hell. In the last battle, the survivors scattered in all directions. Agatha brought a group of people to the concealing forest stone tower to retrieve the experimental materials, while the other group followed the main army to Grey Castle. At that time, the kingdom's mainland was just a barren and desolate land. The ancestor is among the other group? Philin's throat was dry as he asked. Yes, he's the witch's butler. He should have gone to the forest with her, but he flinched and offered to stay behind to take care of the supplies, and the witch agreed to his request. Sir said in a low voice, "You should know what this means." Philin nodded. The housekeeper could be considered as the person the master trusted the most in the family apart from the family members. Most of the time, the housekeeper should live and die with the master, unless the master ordered otherwise. In a sense, offering to leave was no different from betrayal, even if the other party didn't refuse. After the ancestor arrived in the western region, he fell into deep regret and self-blame, and recorded all his feelings. Sir Schilt took out a black book from another box. The witch didn't come back in the end. After that, he cut off contact with the Union, left the refugee camp, and settled alone in this uncultivated area with a few servants. Philin took the black book, but he didn't immediately open it. Instead, he thought of a terrible thing. So you knew from the beginning that everything the church did was wrong. If the witches were dedicated to fighting against the devil, why were they now advertised as the devil's minions? Obviously, there was a great secret behind this. I knew, but I couldn't do anything, Sir said calmly. If witches appeared in the territory, I would definitely hide them, but I couldn't save the witches in Stronghold. After all, the Duke of Ryan didn't think so, and he hated witches even more than the church. In addition, from the records of the later ancestors, we know that they had done the same thing, but they didn't tell the lucky ones who were rescued about the witch kingdom. What about them? Are they still in the family? How could it be possible? Of course they've all entered the grave. He spread out his hands. It's already very rare for them to live to 60 or 70 years old, but they're still human, and they'll also grow old. But you think that the ancestors are still alive. It's only a possibility. Witches have a variety of abilities, and they can't give birth, so I made this speculation. Philin thought for a moment, then changed the topic. Didn't the ancestor think of going to the concealing forest to look for Ancestor Agatha? It's easier said than done. His father shook his head. Even the witches can't safely return, and ordinary mortals going there is no difference from courting death. In addition, 400 years ago, the western region was still a wasteland, with wild beasts and jungles everywhere. Just taking root was extremely difficult, and there was no time to take care of other things. But the ancestor did write this in his will, hoping that in the future, there will be descendants who can go to the concealing forest stone tower, even just to take a look. The light of dawn took a deep breath and opened the dusty record book. From the first page, he could feel the remorse between the lines. Many of the handwriting had become blurred over the years, but because of this, the heavy feeling was even more obvious. He didn't know how long it took, but he turned to the last page, where the content of the will was written. Perhaps it couldn't be called a will, but rather an unfulfilled wish. This was probably the reason why his father showed a regretful expression after drinking. As a former knight, he empathized with him. Do you need me to find her? Philin was silent for a moment, then asked. If she is Agatha herself, then she must live in the prince's castle. As far as I know, there are many witches gathered there. The witches are gathered in the castle? Sir said thoughtfully. No wonder Longsong's stronghold issued a recruitment notice for witches a few days ago. It seems that His Highness is determined to become the enemy of the church. Then he shook his head. No, you don't have to find her. Philin was slightly startled. Don't you want to see her? How can we let the ancestor come to see the younger generation? Sir Schilt smiled. Of course, we have to take the initiative to see her. Me? Yes, I will also go with you to Border Town. His father touched his chin and smiled. Take these things with you. If it is really Agatha herself, then the ancestor's last wish can be realized. To be continued. Chapter 378. What's this? Andrea asked while chewing the dried fish. Prince Roland of Grey Castle was playing with something new again. He spliced the copper pipes together, asked Anna to melt the joints, and then asked Soroya to wrap it with a layer of soft magic products. At first glance, it looked like the pipes installed in the bathroom, but much larger. Each pipe was as thick as a person's thigh. Without the help of the hummingbird, it would be impossible for a person to lift it. Moreover, the copper pipes were not limited to 1 or 2 rooms. They ran horizontally through the whole castle and the witch house. They entered from the corner of the room, connected to a strange metal shutter along the bottom of the wall, and then went through to the next room. At the end of the room, they were connected to the vertical pipes. This huge project attracted many witches. Both the Sleeping Island Witch Union and the Sleeping Island Witch Union were very curious about it. What do you think? He smiled mysteriously. If you guess correctly, you'll have an extra portion of ice cream bread for dinner. Andrea's interest was instantly piqued. Ice cream bread. It was the most magical food here. 2 pieces of bread that were roasted crispy on the outside and tender on the inside were covered with a layer of sweet ice cream filling. She had never heard of such a thing in the Kingdom of Dawn. The first time she tasted it, she immediately fell in love with it. Even though she was repeatedly laughed at by Ashes, she still ate it with a blush. Otherwise, it would be a torture to just look at it on the plate. Are you going to supply water to the room? Ashes frowned. Andrea curled her lips in her heart. Copper was not a cheap metal. Since the small pipe in the bathroom could be used to supply water, why did it have to be so big? But recently, whenever she opened her mouth to refute, she would be blocked by Andreas, who said food is the best in its original taste. Moreover, she had said this in front of Lady Tilly. It was really inconvenient for her to deny it, so she had to pretend that she did not hear her superficial words. You're so short-sighted. Why do you need such a big pipe to supply water? Someone behind her said. His Highness would not do such a laborious thing. Brilliant. It was exactly the same as what she had imagined. Andrea's spirit was lifted. Apart from herself, only Miss Nightingale of the Witch Union dared to speak to an extraordinary in such a tone. She turned around and saw that the man was looking at Ashes with disdain, and his chin was raised at just the right angle. Nobles should have this kind of expression. Andrea secretly praised her. After coming to Border Town, the witch she felt the closest to was this mysterious woman. The skills Nightingale had shown during the rescue of the witches in the ruins were indeed extraordinary. She was also a noble like him, and even her hair color was very similar. After several sniping battles against hybrid demonic beasts on the city wall, the other party had also recognized his ability, and even shared the dried fish with him, which was quite the aristocratic style. Most importantly, she didn't like Ashes at all. Although I don't know how Ashes offended her the first time she came to Border Town, but isn't the enemy of my enemy my friend? Moreover, her personality was so compatible with his. You speak as if you already know the answer, Ashes shrugged. Of course I know. Nightingale raised the corner of her mouth. When His Highness was drawing the design, I was always in the office, and I saw all the drawings he drew. That's not fair. Mystery Moon muttered. She doesn't participate in the guessing. The prince's words made Nightingale's proud expression stiffen. I'll give you a hint. These pipes are only part of the system. You might as well go to other places. It will be easier to guess the answer. Goo. Maggie and Lightning immediately flew out of the room. The other witches were not willing to be left behind, and one by one they followed the direction of the pipes and scattered. Andrea deliberately fell behind everyone, and after they left, she gave Nightingale a wink, calling her to the door. What the hell is this? Andrea asked in a low voice. If I get the answer right, you can have half of the bread for dinner. I don't know. Nightingale's answer made her slightly stunned. Didn't you say that you've read all the drawings? Yes, it's like the natural science theoretical foundation. You can recognize the words on it, right? But can you understand what it means when it's all linked together? Andrea opened her mouth, but found that the other's words were completely reasonable. She had also read that book, and it was really no different from a heavenly book. If you can understand His Highness's intentions just by looking at the drawings, I'm afraid that in the Witch Union, only Anna has such an ability, Nightingale suggested. If you ask her, she will definitely be able to tell you the answer. After waiting for her to leave, Andrea hesitated again and again, but in the end, she still didn't call Anna out of the room. It wasn't because she was reserved or embarrassed, but because she was in awe. She had never been afraid of the vicious gangsters, or the cruel and merciless judges, but she felt a heartfelt fear towards this less than 20-year-old girl. She remembered that once when she accidentally passed by the prince's office, she heard Anna talking to His Royal Highness. The content of the conversation even now gave her goosebumps. High parabola calculation, bringing in the parameters of the falling point to correct the orbit, as well as the transformation of kinetic energy in the ideal state. All of these made her suddenly freeze in place. Why is it that as a fellow witch, Anna can speak words that I can't understand at all so fluently? Since then, Andrea had a feeling of looking up to Anna, feeling that she was completely not the same kind of person as herself, but at the same level as Lady Tilly. Since she couldn't get an answer, she could only rely on herself. Following the prince's instructions, Andrea explored the rooms one by one. She found that in the completed rooms, the copper pipes were separated by a right-angle iron fence, as if to prevent people from touching the pipes. If it wasn't for the barbarian ashes, even if the copper pipes were touched, it wouldn't matter, right? Thinking of what Nightingale had said, His Royal Highness never does things that are strenuous and unrewarding. It seemed that these iron fences obviously had their own purpose. When she came to the first floor of the witch house, she made a new discovery. There was a bungalow between the castle and the witch house, and the copper pipes that led to the two buildings extended from here. Inside the bungalow was a huge iron box. The lower half of the box was hollow, and there was a huge chimney at the top. It looked like a stove used for cooking. She also saw a pipe directly connected to the well in the yard, which looked like the water supply device of a water tower. Wait, is this used to boil water? But if the pipe is used to transport hot water, there is no need to make it so big, right? Andrea was puzzled. Until the end she still couldn't figure it out. Before dinner, His Royal Highness gathered all the witches in the hall and said with a smile, "From today on, the castle's heating system will be officially used." Heating system? Ashes asked doubtfully. That's right. After the hot water is boiled in the boiler, the high-temperature steam will enter the room through the pipes and pass through the radiator to raise the temperature of the room. As long as the doors and windows are closed, the whole room will quickly warm up, the prince explained. Compared to the fire bucket, which is inconvenient to move and needs to be open to ventilate. Otherwise there will be the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. The new heating system doesn't have to worry about this at all, and you can still enjoy the warmth of spring when you sleep. After the commissioning is finished, this heating system will gradually be popularized in the residential area. Then, apart from Anna, Soroya, and Hummingbird, who participated in the installation of the heating system, there is only one person who guessed the ice cream bread correctly tonight, and that is Tilly. During dinner, Andrea stared at Lady Tilly's smiling face as she ate the delicious food, completely forgetting her reservations as a noble. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.